I'll call meeting to order. We have some threatening, ominous weather in the area, and so we're going to try and move quickly through member comments. I need a motion to approve the agenda, and I believe there's an amendment to the agenda. Director Grewich?
Yeah, I move to amend the agenda.
I need your microphone on, sir.
It is.
I can't hear you, that's what I'm asking. Okay.
I move to amend the agenda to remove item M, Resolution 5, and add it to the September 7th board meeting. In its place, I would like to also remove the Lake Equity Work Group from the consent agenda and place it in the recently vacated item M spot.
Otherwise, you move to adopt the agenda as stated. Correct?
Yes,
With
correct.
those amendments.
With those amendments.
As amended.
As amended.
I have a motion to adopt the agenda as amended. Is there a second?
No, I haven't. You have it further?
I have a further.
Do I have a second to Director Grywich's motion?
Second.
Second by Director Juszczak. Discussion. Director Petrine.
Yes, I would like to defer items on the agenda, items N and O. I think they deserve more than an hour's discussion, particularly if we're going to take action on those items.
If I can clarify, it's not intended to take action, and so the note is not clear. All I want to do tonight is start the discussion, and we would continue that discussion to a future board meeting. I don't anticipate taking any action this evening, if that helps you, but we need to get it started. It's been on the agenda for some time.
I understand that, as long as there's no intention to.
Absolutely not.
to adopt.
They both have action written.
I understand that, Director Flashman. That wasn't my intention. It was to start a conversation.
Okay. As long
With
as
that,
there's-
withdraw?
I withdraw my motion.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor of adopting the amendment as the agenda as amended, say aye.
Aye.
Director Collins says yay, and that's unanimous of all those present voting.
Laurie Dodd is present and also says yay.
Wonderful. Thank you, Director Dodd. Didn't know that you had joined us, so that's good. Director Dodd, are you able to turn on your camera? It would make things easier when I call for a vote. Director Johnson is also online. Director Johnson, did you vote to adopt the agenda?
You did.
Did? Thank you.
Yes.
Right, so that's unanimous on all those present are voting. We move on. Member comments. I know that we have one from Director Flashman. Is there anybody else signed up to speak?
There
Ms.
are no
Copeland?
other people signed up to speak this evening.
I'm sorry?
There are no other people signed up to speak this evening.
Director Flashman, the floor is yours for 3 minutes.
Thank you. In the last board meeting,
Director Flashman,
yes,
since you're speaking as a member, name and
Recording stopped.
my name is Erwin Flashman. I live at 1327 Buttermilk Lane.
Recording in progress.
It's been a while since I've had to say that. So. At the last board meeting, there was a vote which approved the obtention and placement of AEDs at a number of facilities as well as 3 ball fields. And during the course of the discussion, I attempted to have the ball fields separated, but that was not supported in my motion, and so therefore not considered. The motion was approved, and subsequent to that meeting, I wrote a memo which I circulated to all of the board members and to others who are on the list regarding the issues that I saw attached to the availability of AEDs at the ball fields. And I shared that, of course, with the president. And the president informed me that he had requested staff, in particular CEO Mack and Laura Kowalski, to look into the issues that I had raised to determine what should, if anything, should be done in those regards and report back to the board. And so therefore I wanted to share that information with the members and also to thank President Farrell for taking that action, because I feel that this is a matter of some significance and seriousness. And so with that, I thank you.
Without objection, I'd have your memorandum entered into the minutes of tonight's meeting.
Thank you.
Is there any objection?
None.
Hearing and seeing none, it's so ordered. There are no other member comments, no one seeking the floor. Good evening to Mr. Lovis, past member of this august body. Welcome, happy to have you here.
I have the whole floor to myself.
All right, start cleaning up. All right, so next item is the consent calendar. We have already moved item 5 on the consent calendar to later in the evening. Can I have a motion to adopt the consent calendar?
I move to accept the consent calendar.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved by Director Petrine, second by Director Graywich. Discussion, which only should be you want something else taken off. Hearing and seeing none, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor will say aye.
Aye.
And Director Johnson votes aye. Unanimous of all those present and voting. Next item, the CEO update. You, go ahead. I'm sorry?
I think, did Trevor,
Vote aye.
excuse me, Travis,
Travis?
we're going to go through this.
Yes, I know.
I did, aye.
You voted aye. Okay.
He was going to
CEO update, there was a video that we all had the opportunity to view. And I don't know, Mr. Cummins, if you have anything to supplement that with that, or if we're ready for members of the board to ask questions.
I would just like to formally welcome Peter Lusk to his very first full board of directors meeting. And I think we're going to have to wait and see how long for him to stop being called the new Larry Butler, which I'm hoping is tonight. So, but happy to take questions if you have any on the information I provided.
I think it's on the consent agenda. The minutes are on the consent agenda. Yep. Forgive me, where there was a parliamentary inquiry I had to deal with. I only have one question. Does anyone have questions for the CEO on the CEO update? I have one, but if anybody else has one, please proceed. Hearing, seeing none. On the Lifeguard Appreciation Day, I didn't see a time and place on the 31st.
I don't know that we have a scheduled event. Laura Kowalski is on the phone with us, I think. I think that was more alerting you all to that and letting the public know to make sure and say thank you to the.
Well, I would think some board members would want to be there when you were expressing our gratitude. That's why I'm asking, is there a time and place set yet for that event?
I'm going to turn over to Laura. I don't know that we imagined event. I think it was more to let everybody know since now is the busy time.
Ms.
Hi
Guo?
there. Hi there, everybody. Hopefully you can hear me okay. I'm driving at a softball tournament with my daughter. So we don't have one single event because, as you know, we have 13 pools and that staff is supposed to be at the pools and working. So our aquatics management team do have small thank yous that they will be doing throughout the day for the staff to show the appreciation. It's really just, this is the National Lifeguard Appreciation Day. So just an announcement, if you happen to see a lifeguard or if you want to stop by and say thank you, anyone is more than willing to, and the lifeguards would much appreciate it.
Is it possible, Ms. Kowalski, to get some times to the board members so that we have an opportunity to thank the lifeguards?
We're happy to set something up for anyone that would like to thank them. No problem.
Yeah, let's go ahead and share that information with the directors. Any other questions on the CEO update? Director Petrine?
Mac, are there any other issues other than what's in your presentation that rise to something you wanted to mention to the board? I'm just an open-ended question.
No, I would like to schedule some time with you to talk about some things that keep floating up around non-assessment revenue and certain kinds of events and some value things that come up from time to time. Some of that will likely come up in our discussion later in the evening around the business development work. Mostly in my commitment to you all to not have any surprises. I want to make sure I'm on the same page with you because I am authorized to approve certain things. And as I'm doing that, I don't want anyone to say, wait a minute, that's not consistent with the value system of the current board, those sorts of things.
Okay.
Seeing no other requests for questions, we'll move on to the land use and comp plan update. Was there Did we do a video on this
We,
one?
we did not. There really was just some information around timing. And so we have put out that information as a 3-slide PowerPoint, which is really one.
Okay. I do have a fair amount of information to share with the community and with my fellow board members. The Planning Commission voted to approve the Reston Master Plan on July 20th. There were, and it will go in front of the Board of Supervisors on September 12th. We had asked for a number of amendments. Some of them were approved by the Planning Commission. 4 of them were not. And I believe that we will need to continue to talk with Supervisor Alcorn to try and get these changes made. And if, I'll beg the board's indulgence as I go through the 4. The Lake Newport area that we know is identified as a convenience center and identified as potentially an office building. RA owns that property. RA is never going to redevelop Lake House as an office building, and that needs to come out. In fact, it doesn't, the Lake Newport Convenience Center doesn't exist in all, and so that causes confusion with the membership. There is a listing in the master plan of a number of Fairfax County Park Authority properties that are outside the Reston Master Plan area. And Director Juszczyk has objected to that when she served on the task force, and I have objected to it. And the reason it's there is because as developers go through the TSA redevelopment process, they are required to spend $1,900 a unit on recreation. Well, in many cases, the developers don't want to do that recreation facility on their own property. So in lieu of that, they give money. Now, they could give that money to RA, and gee, we'd all like that, or they can give it to the Park Authority. And then the Park Authority can go use that money on these parks that are outside Reston. And we have an example of that. It's already happened. Across the street, the developer Brookfield across the street satisfied their obligation by buying the former Thoburn driving range. The Thoburn driving range is in Vienna, and the apartments here are about 5 miles away. And so there's a real issue with having recreational proffers or recreational commitment being spent on facilities that aren't serving the people of Reston or the residents that are generating the recreational need. And when they don't do that, it falls on the association. We want to get that changed. We want to get that removed. There's also language that suggests that the Park Authority has a veto over what Reston Association does with its facilities. And God bless Commissioner Carter, he actually made it worse the other night when he was making his remarks, indicating that if there was a conflict between the Reston Association and the Park Authority, we better do what the Park Authority wants. I don't think that was his intention, but if you read the transcript, it reads like that. There's another provision in which we talk about trails in the TSA in one section, and then we talk about RA's trails, and never do we say, hey, by the way, can you get the trails in the TSA to hook up with our 55-mile trail system? Those are simple fixes. I don't know why they weren't included. I watched the hearing. I was otherwise engaged that evening, but it just doesn't make any sense why those 4 things aren't in there. So if you're watching and you want to reach out to Supervisor Alcorn and ask him to make those 4 changes, the association and all of our members would be better off. The other thing I want to talk about is the Comstock PCA. The Comstock property is over at the corner of Sunrise Valley and Wheelie. And they're in for a profit condition amendment, effectively a new rezoning. And they are proposing, and it's not an increase in density, but they have 968 units, dwelling units, in that property. If we were to pay our assessment, that would be $738,000 a year that would come into the association. Now, you want to talk about increasing assessments or broadening the assessment space? But here's what's more important. By not getting that money, I have to and we have to raise our assessment to each of our members $30 every year by these folks not being part of RA. And that's a tax increase. It's a tax increase just as if they increase the RCC rate. And I don't understand it. I don't get the justification for it. Mr. Clementi, the owner of Comstock, is very well-to-do. I don't understand why each of us has to give him $30 a year. But that's what's going on right now. That comes up in September. 12th in front of the Board of Supervisors, and we hope Mr. Clementi can be brought to reason and subject the property to the Reston Association. But this is going to come up more and more as more and more projects. Right now, I think we have, you told me not that long ago, Director Petrine, there are 1,000 units already that don't, in the TSA area that don't contribute to RA.
No, there are more, there are more.
There are more than that, that's right. And the irony here is the county owns about 1,000 units in RA. And so they're having to cough up extra money also. So not only is RA subsidizing Mr. Clementi, so does the county. The county taxpayers in Mount Vernon are subsidizing Mr. Clementi. Finally, the third thing on land use is at Tuesday's board meeting, Supervisor Alcorn had his own motion to bring forward and start staff work on the site-specific plan amendments, of which there are 10, I think. Is that right, Director Juszak? Do I have that number right? Mm-hmm. There are 10 of them along the TSA corridor, and they will be coming forward. Now, I don't know when the anticipated date for them to come in front of the Planning Commission. I didn't see that in the board motion. We have some time, but a lot of that is converting non-residential sites to residential. One of the proposals that we would be paying close attention to is a proposal, Roland Clark, where the applicant is proposing to construct an indoor recreational facility in order to satisfy their $1,900 unit obligation. It has been told to us that, by the applicant's representative, that the Park Authority doesn't want the building. I certainly think we would take careful look at a donation of that building to RA, and we would look favorably on that donation being made to Reston Community Center. I don't think we want to get into a battle between us and them, but it's quite possibly a solution in some parts to the pickleball noise problem if that facility has pickleball inside and is surrounded by walls. So we have an interest in all of these applications, and we're going to need to keep a close eye on all of that. Director Petrine.
If I'm not mistaken, I think of the 10 projects, only one is covenanted property, and that's the brown bag building at the corner of Reston Parkway and, what is it, Library Street? I don't.
Right.
Yeah, maybe it is library.
So, by not being coveted property, if I understand it correctly, they have to volunteer to make that change. And
They put it
just
in
being cynical.
They put in a proffer. They proffer to join RA.
Well, but they would have to, if I understand virtually all of the projects, they are all rental. And being cynical that we have been unsuccessful heretofore to get the 3,384 units that are now in the TSA that exist into RA, because it's just an additional expense to those owners. I just want to be clear that it's not, I think it is unlikely that unless the county changes its attitude that we will get those people to join.
One person has to change their attitude. Walter Alcorn. Walter has the ability, forgive me, I'm sorry, Walter Alcorn has the ability to say to any applicant, if you don't proffer to join RA, I'm denying your application, and that denial will be upheld. So it's up to Supervisor Alcorn. And if he doesn't do it, then it's a shift of expense on our membership. And at this point, it's $30. If you total all of them up, it's a couple of $100.
Just as a financial guy, I'm curious where the $30 came.
You take the money that we would otherwise get from them and divide it by 24,000.
Okay.
That's $30. That may be simplistic,
No, that's all right.
but that's where it comes from.
At least I understand where the number came from.
Right. Director Juszak.
Not that our meeting isn't exhilarating, but the Reston Comprehensive Plan amendment meeting being held by Walter Alcorn is actually happening tonight during our meeting at 7 o'clock. So it's unfortunate that, RA will be having our meeting at the same time, even though we've expressed that there are these things that we'd like to see. So it is online, starts in about 8 minutes. So anyone who, doesn't want to email Walter, you could hop on that meeting and give him some of the feedback you learned here tonight from RA.
And just so it's clear to everybody, as soon as we heard that there would be a conflict, we did bring it to Supervisor Alcorn's attention, and it was, gee whiz, isn't that a shame? So that's why we're not at the meeting, and he understands that's why we're not at the meeting. Anything further on land use? Director Flashman?
Yes, I have a question. In these projects, I'm assuming that you have to conduct a traffic study. And traffic will be terribly impinged by adding 900 units to the area where it is being proposed to add. Has that been considered for its impacts and what it will do to traffic?
It has, and
In coming over here this evening, early in the evening, I came on Reston Parkway, and it was backed up. It was very, very slow.
Right.
And it will be just worse.
an applicant has an obligation to submit a traffic study under Virginia law. And it is considered as part of the application. Frequently, as a result, the applicant, and I haven't gone over the details of this proffer package, Director Flashman, but the applicant in many cases will proffer to make transportation improvements in the roads immediately adjacent to their proposal. And that's what Fairfax County Department of Transportation analyzes and makes suggestions to the applicant on how they would mitigate the impact of the traffic.
Do we know whether that has been done in this particular?
Oh, yeah, it's done in every case. You won't even get here, you won't get a hearing scheduled until the 527 traffic study is submitted to the county.
But is there a satisfactory mitigation plan?
I would leave that to Fairfax County Department of Transportation.
I bet it's just going to get worse.
No, I wouldn't take that bet. Any other questions, comments, observations regarding land use, comprehensive plan, rezonings, et cetera? We will pay attention to that. I've mentioned to our CEO that there's a publication that we could get our hands on to keep us abreast of what's going on and give us very early warning of when applications are submitted to the county for rezonings and the like. Typically, I tell a client it's 18 months to get through the land use process in Fairfax County. And that's about right. And so if we get our hands on this newsletter, we will know about these applications 18 months before the Planning Commission hearing and have ample opportunity to make our concerns known. So hopefully we can get that publication and start identifying applications that impact the people of Reston. Anything else? Let's move on. Capital projects quarterly update.
I'm sorry, I do have my hand up. Sorry. I'm seeing in the chat that there is an inquiry from a member attending the meeting virtually for the website link so that they can participate in the meeting that is conflicting with hours at which Supervisor Walter Alcorn might be addressed. Does anyone have that information that they could provide in the chat?
Brittany, can I email you and you can paste it in? Because I have it, I just not online.
We're going to try and make that happen. Thank you, Director Dodd.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. There was a video on the capital projects quarterly update. I'm sure everybody had a chance to look at it. Are there any questions on the capital projects quarterly update? I have one, but anybody else have any? Okay, I guess I got it. Chris, what's the status on the Hook Road site plan?
Hook Road site plan, so we addressed all the remaining issues that the urban forester had. We've gone through that with them, we've resubmitted, and so we're expecting our final approval here in the very near future.
What was the date of submission?
That was mid part of last week, the resubmission.
So do we know what the 45-day deadline is?
From that date of the submission, yeah.
Okay.
So it's on the clock, but we are not expecting anything further after this last round because it was just the urban forester. We met with her, and we believe we've got everything addressed that she wanted to see, and we should be good to go now.
So as I brought up the last time when we were dealing with problems at Hunter's Woods, at the end of 45 days, we give them 10 days' notice, and then we get the court to approve the plan. So I'm very interested in getting, if you can follow up, the specific day that it was submitted so that we can, I mean, this thing's been going on for how many years? Somebody tell me.
At least 6.
Okay,
3 years, yeah.
at least 3 years, which is twice
From the
what it
beginning.
normally takes. And it's 3 years before that to develop the plan. So there are lots of people who are very frustrated and anxious and antsy that we get going here. So if you would be kind enough to send us the actual date so we can figure out what the 45-day deadline is, I would appreciate that.
Absolutely.
Anything else for Mr. Shoemaker? Director Juszczyk?
On Shadowwood Pool Phase 2, you had mentioned kind of that the next steps were the engineering and then going to DRB. And so I was curious if it will come back to the board after engineering but before DRB, or what is the plan there? Because last I thought we left it we had some inkling that the gas line was close to Shadowwood and that might be the best bet to heat the pool, but we weren't really sure what the costs of that would be. And I would be interested in us kind of analyzing that type of thing before moving forward with project. So I didn't know if that was part of your plan too.
So we kind of, being that we broke this project up into 2 different phases, it's almost kind of splitting the typical life cycle in a way. And so there is a little bit of a look we need to do in terms of how we want to address second phase and its scheduling. So as I mentioned, we're still kind of getting through some of the preliminary details with phase 2, but I would be happy to, bring that before you with any details you may want to see before we move too much further into it. But we have generally accepted the primary scope of work through the planning and scoping phase. That was in the earlier KDP. And so at this point, we're just kind of, getting through that piece, and we can review it at the next KDP for engineering and architecture before we then move into the actual procurement phase, which also includes the estimation. But we should have at least some sort of rough order of magnitude as part of the engineering piece of it. We can start kind of pricing that out at that phase, even just as an early on estimation.
My memory of, go ahead.
No, go.
My memory is that when we voted to appropriate that money, we voted to extend the gas heating. It was part of it. And breaking up into 2 pieces was something that the staff did in hopes, turns out vain hope, that we could get the pool open this year. The board didn't break it up. That was a decision made by the staff, and a reasonable decision. This isn't the criticism of that decision, but the decision to extend gas heat to that pool has been made by this board. And so if there's some kind of adjustment or something like that, based on the money that this board already voted and appropriated, sure, come on back. But we've already said, go heat the pool.
Yes.
So
So I will go look at the minutes because that's not my recollection
Okay.
of that piece of the project. But I'll happily go look at the minutes of what we approved, and maybe I'm wrong. Thanks.
Okay. Director Petrine.
When I drove by Shadowwood this evening on my way here, there, on the newly squared off end of the pool, there's still a pile of rubble. Yeah, we obviously we're not going to meet the deadline for, the July 31st as was proposed in the original contract. Are there additional deterioration that you had to deal with there or are we still progressing as intended?
So we already identified a lot of the beam damage and basin damage earlier on as part of that other change order we had to address. They haven't come across anything substantial. There was a few skimmers as a result of they kind of pulling those apart. They sort of brittled and kind of broke apart. So
Right.
we're looking at perhaps replacing some of those, but they won't exceed the authorization that was given at the last meeting to extend. So we're still going to be able to operate within those bounds, and that's not a real big schedule breaker. It's pretty quick to repair those items. So it's generally progressing on track. Following those repairs, so it's kind of picked back up speed again.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Shoemaker? Director Johnson, Director Dodd, Director Collins? I mean to ignore you. Thank you, Director.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shoemaker.
I do want to make one last update, though, regarding Hunter's Woods. I'm sorry, yes.
The Hunters Woods ball field?
Yeah, Hunters Woods ball field redevelopment. So we did get through the access agreement with the adjoining cluster. And so the pre-con meeting with the county is scheduled on August 3rd. And so we'll hopefully be starting construction within 2 to 3 weeks following that. So we're moving right along, and we're getting ready to mobilize on that site. So the communication plan's been drafted. We're reviewing it internally. We're getting ready to start executing it and getting word out. But the president over there is well aware. She's actually going to join me at the pre-con meeting. So she has a firm grasp of exactly what's going to happen and how we're going to move forward. So that's just one little update that came through in the last week or so since I made the presentation.
Great, excellent, thank you so much. The next item is Director Collins's quarterly update. Are there any questions for Director Collins or anyone else on the quarterly update? Any questions? Any comments? Hearing and seeing none, we'll move on to the Treasurer's Report. And that was also a video. Any questions or comments on the Treasurer's Report? Hearing and, go ahead.
Let me ask, Tom Deal? Yeah, have we received word on status of the 2022 audit from Forvis, our auditors?
We are still giving them the corrections to make it for the final.
Okay. The reason I bring it up is that last year's audit was late, very late in the year before that was finalized, and Tom and staff have worked very hard with the new auditors to complete the audit much sooner. So we should have that wrapped up for the next board meeting, as well as, at least based on the meeting that we had a week ago, Wednesday, with Forvis, they expect to have the tax return, the 990, completed at the same time. So again, substantial, months ahead of where we were last year.
That's fabulous. Thank you for that. Director Jerzak, did you want something? Director Flashman?
Yes, I have a very simple question.
Yes.
On these expenses. You have listed under administrative expenses, finance expense. Can you explain that to me?
Let me go to it.
The credit card fees.
Yep. Those are the credit card fees.
Okay.
So what we have done is we absorb the merchant charge for all credit card usage. And that's one of the items that we'll be talking about as we talk about the budget in 24, 25.
Already in progress to be eliminated?
Well, we are looking at, yes.
That would be up to the board. So we'll have a vote on that.
There's a board motion ready.
Already to do it for this coming year. That's right. Thank you
Yeah,
for reminding me that.
We're, like the rest of everything financial, it is a bit more complicated than either absorbing or making members pay for that, we're finding out. And with staff, we're working through those issues so that we have an operable plan, not just a plan,
Not just a fiat.
not a dream.
Any questions on the Treasurer's Report? Hearing and seeing none, I need a motion for executive session. And Mr. Cummins, let me know who we need in executive session besides the board. Can I have that motion? Director Greiwich.
Move to convene into executive session to discuss personnel and contractual matters.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second, Director Jerzak. Any conversation, any discussion, debate? Hearing and seeing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That is unanimous of all those present and voting. And I'll ask them to excuse us while we go through the
Hi, everyone. This is Mac Cummins, the CEO for the Reston Association. I've got a couple of interesting updates that I'd like to share with everyone about some exciting things coming up in the community. I would like to give everyone an update on the Barton Hill Tennis Facility update project. The Barton Hill Tennis Facility currently has 4 tennis courts and ancillary landscaping and a parking lot located at the corner of Barton Hill Road and Sunrise Valley Drive. The association is looking to repair the facility as the courts are currently cracked and aged to the point that they're in need of resurfacing. The association is looking to add pickleball as an amenity at the location and is currently considering how many courts should be added at that location. We will also be doing ancillary improvements to the parking lot and to the trail system in and around the area. There are upcoming meetings that we would like to invite you to participate in relating to that project. On this slide, you will see the estimated timeline around the Barton Hill project. This is a graphic that we use to explain where key decision points are being made around the planning and scoping of a project. As part of the Barton Hill project, the community hosted a community meeting to ask the residents what were the exciting parts of the project that were coming down the line and areas that the community wanted the association to look further into. As a result of that meeting, there were a number of things that the staff have looked further into and are prepared to host a second community meeting around different options to address some of those things. We have scheduled that meeting for September 6th, right after we're all back and the kids are in school, at 6:30 p.m. here at the RA headquarters. We're going to send out formal invites to everyone that participated in the previous meeting, but I would like to mention here so that we can get the word out. Please plan on coming to that meeting if you'd like to continue to be involved in the planning and scoping of the Barton Hill project. Additionally, we are scheduling this item for decision-making at the Board of Directors meeting later that month on September 28th, where we will present the input that we received at the community meeting, along with options for the Board of Directors to consider. If you would like additional information on the Barton Hills Tennis Project, please feel free to call the phone number that you see on this slide or visit our website, and there's a button that you can pull down and look for future updates and information. I would like to update you on some exciting things coming in our Parks and Recreation member services coming later this summer. And I would also like to spend a moment thanking our staff for the great work that they have done in making memories for the members here at Reston. I will start with reminding everyone that Lifeguard Appreciation Day is coming on July 31st. Our lifeguards are our first responders and provide a greatly needed service to the community, knowing that we have safety personnel on site should something bad occur. Please join me in thanking our lifeguards. Stop by and tell them thank you for all you do, and particularly on July 31st. So, how fast are you? Have you participated yet in the Glade Runner 2023 water slide competition? Please come on down anytime before the end of the month and test yourself and see how fast you can get down the Glade water slide at the swimming facility. Very popular amongst the kids, trying to get down as quickly as possible. You will notice that we have different age groups, and try to beat your fastest time. Have you ever wanted to try stand-up paddleboarding? Not only is this a great form of exercise, but it's also an opportunity to be out on our lakes and be out seeing the nature that makes Reston beautiful. We are offering a number of programs this year, and I would like to highlight a few of them here, looking at sunrise and sunset paddleboard events that you see on the left side of this slide in early August, as well as an opportunity to take your dog out on the paddleboard. Lastly, looking at Lake Audubon and seeing the wildlife on the August 12th is an opportunity to see things that you may not have seen out on that particular lake. We'd like to invite you to come out and try stand-up paddleboarding, visit our website, or come down to the RA headquarters, and we will be happy to help you with this event. We have some really exciting trips and events coming up that you should consider registering for and participating. One of our most popular events at the end of the summer, as we wind down and drain our swimming pools, is our doggy paddle events. Nearly always selling out, these events are a very fun time for your four-legged friend to jump in and out of the pool and enjoy some cold water on a very hot day. Please consider registering soon. It does sell out. There's an opportunity to get to Moulin Rouge. Please consider coming to that event and enjoy a night out at the theater. And lastly, one of our more popular events is the opportunity to bring the kids down and see all of the big trucks that Reston Association uses to make Reston the place that it is. This event is scheduled on August 4th between 8:30 a.m. and noon, and it is always very, very, very popular amongst the children. Nature is a significant part of our programming here at the Reston Association. Held in July, we had our Fairy Festival that had over 150 people register and left lasting memories for all of the participants that came down and had a chance to sip tea, make their fairy house, and stroll along the trail to look for hidden fairies and colorful mushrooms. Coming up in August, we are looking at events that include Dragonfly classes. On the right-hand side of this slide, you will see where those events are and what time. Generally, they are at the Walker Nature Center and involve an outstanding opportunity for your little one to learn more about dragonflies and how they work here in Northern Virginia. Thanks, everyone. Summer is going great here at the Reston Association. I look forward to seeing you all out and about in the community and enjoying our live, work, and play lifestyle.
My name is Chris Shoemaker, Director of Capital Projects. Good evening. My name is Chris Shoemaker, Director of Capital Projects. I'm here to give you a brief update on second quarter projects for 2023. Again, for 2023, we have our capital projects map that can be found on the Capital webpage on reston.org. This page includes an interactive Google map that includes all the active, scheduled, and completed projects. Major projects can also be found on a separate web page you can reference in the below image with the red arrows. We have project pages for Barton Hill Tennis, Hunters Woods Ball Field, Lake Throw, and Shadowwood Pools. We'll be adding more as other major projects come online. Starting is an overview of the second quarter projects thus far. Of the 70 projects, 27 have been completed, 15 are in progress, 26 are scheduled, and 2 have been canceled. Those 2 projects are the Polo Fields parking lot and the Uplands Pool parking lot, for a total of $31,232. Polo Fields was originally included in the event that we had to trench across the parking lot to install dedicated power for the future Polo Fields spray park replacement. Upon further investigation, we determined that a solar option was viable and we would not necessitate installation of a permanent power line. At Uplands, we're going to trial a new seal coating application to extend its life and try to coordinate it with the replacement of the Uplands tennis courts, which are scheduled in 2025. This will provide us greater economies of scale due to the parking lot's very small size, and therefore high expense for deployment and labor costs for its installation. Next, we'll have some project highlights for second quarter, starting with paving and drainage. At Hunters Woods Pool, we replaced the parking lot as well as installed a new stormwater pipe across the main entrance leading from Reston Parkway. You can see that in the right image, and the before and after images in the bottom left. At CSF, we replaced a large concrete RCP pipe that crossed the main entrance to the Central Services Facility. You can see that in the upper middle image with the red arrow. Another project that was completed in the second quarter was Hickory Pond dredging. Over 400 cubic yards of accumulated sediment were removed from the pond and transferred to a disposal station in Loudoun County. We don't expect this to be done for another 5 years and should help prevent additional sediment from accumulating in Lake Ann Canal and into Lake Ann itself. We're currently testing Bright Pond and Butler Pond for its dredging needs for 2024. Another project highlight is at Newbridge Tennis, where we perform crack repairs and color coatings to all 4 courts. In addition, we ground down several areas that were showing signs of blistering. We anticipate this refurbishment to last until 2030, when the entire facility will be renovated. The last project highlight is the butterfly overlook deck. This wooden observation deck was installed overlooking the butterfly meadow just down from the Pony Barn Pavilion. This observation deck will provide an educational opportunity for adjacent schools and camp programs to view the migrating butterflies and insects that frequent this meadow. Now for some projects occurring in the third quarter. The CSF fuel system, which you can see in the top image, will be replaced, as well as the CSF warehouse passage doors. At North Hills Pavilion, we'll be performing some ADA enhancements, as you can see in the conceptual image in the bottom left. At Polo Fields Rec area, we'll be installing a new spray feature you can see in the bottom right image. And then at Nature Center, we'll be preparing to install our first ever electric vehicle charging station. Now for updates on major projects, starting with Barton Hill Tennis. Barton Hill Tennis is still in the planning and scoping phase of the project lifecycle and will require approval of the scope of work by the board and KDP1 before moving into design, architecture, and engineering. We performed a sound study for pickleball and are working on sound attenuation options to mitigate noise. We're also continuing to work on a justification letter to send to VDOT for review for a crosswalk across Barton Hill Road. Now an update on the Shadowwood Pool project. The first phase of the Shadowwood Pool project, we're currently in the implementation and construction phase of the project lifecycle. Work is currently underway and is estimated to be completed sometime in early to mid-fall. Following a communication to the RE membership in early July, we announced that Shadowwood Pool would not be anticipated to reopen for the 2023 swim season and will be reopened in 2024. In the meantime, design work is in progress on Phase 2 elements that will begin following completion of Phase 1. Some of the work completed as part of Phase 1 for the Shadowwood Pool project is the removal of over 40 tons of accumulated plaster from the pool basin. You can see some of that debris and accumulation in the top two right images. Following demolition, we uncovered a substantial amount of damage to the pool beam and basin that necessitated unplanned repairs. This unfortunately pushed us outside the window of reopening for the 2023 swim season. We have recently completed selected tree removals and prunings around the site that will provide additional sunlight and limit debris falling into the pool. Crews are currently working on the squaring of the pool basin that you can see in the bottom right image. This will facilitate improved lap swimming for users. For Phase 2 of the project, we have several items that are currently in the design and engineering phase before submitting for permits and DRB approval. These include the installation of a gas line and equipment for pool heating, conversion of the wading pool into a splash pad, modifications to the pool deck and security fencing, bathhouse updates and improvements, and updates to general landscaping. Now an update on the Hunters Woods Ballfield redevelopment project. Following RA board approval of KDP3, we have moved into the implementation and construction phase of the project lifecycle. RA staff is currently coordinating with the Hunters Woods Condominium Association on access into the site before we can schedule the pre-construction meeting with Fairfax County, which is the first step in construction. Work is anticipated to begin sometime in summer of this year and be completed by spring of 2024. Now an update on the Lake Throw Pool project. The Lake Throw Pool project is currently at 75% completion and behind schedule due to various site conditions, including poor soils, utility conflicts, and building issues. The parking lot, bathroom addition, framing, rough-in plumbing, electrical, and elevated deck have been completed, and crews are working on interior renovations and are progressing as well on site fencing and lighting. Following communication to the RA membership in early July, Lake Throw is not anticipated to reopen for the 2023 swim season. It will reopen in 2024. Second quarter snapshot report on the capital budget. Of the $7.8 million budget, just over $2.4 million has been executed, with an additional $5.1 million left to spend. We're currently forecasting just over $250,000 in positive variance. Compared to this time last year, we're over $1.6 million ahead of expenditures, with several major projects that are ongoing or about to be underway. We'll accelerate expenses between now and the end of the third quarter. If you have any questions, comments, or need more information on our project, please reach out to us at capitalprojects@reston.org, call us at 703-435-6556, or visit the Capital Project webpage on reston.org.
This is the Treasurer's Report for June 2023. The Association's condition is recreational registrations and programs that met the budget expectations. Camps and other summer activities are well underway.
Non-financial revenue sources are either at or above budget expectations, and operating expenses in total remain materially below budget as the association continues to recruit for new and open positions in a tight labor market. On the revenue side, assessments are fractionally ahead of budget expectations and are $571,000 higher than for the same period in 2022. Fees have recovered from their May levels and are now 9.1% better than budget and 34% ahead of the same period in 2022. Interest and dividend increases, both against budget and actuals for 2022, reflect current favorable market conditions and the generally higher level of interest being earned on RA bank deposits. Recreational program registrations have slowed as expected, but are at budgeted and 2022 levels, led by programs at the Nature Center and in tennis. Other revenue continues to perform below expectations off the levels projected by the 2023 budget, but in total are $43,000 or 8.5% better than for the same period in 2022. Positive results have been generated by central services and covenants. Operating expenses, when reviewed functionally, you can see that people costs due to the loss of several key positions due to attrition, as well as several key senior openings, are taking longer to fill than anticipated. As a result, 80% of the positive variance in total budgeted operating expenses resides in the timing and savings associated with those positions. At the end of June, RA had a total of 6 open budgeted positions, and the total number of employees is down 1 person from June 2022. Capital spending. $2.358 million of the $7.823 million of capital projects budgeted through 2023 have been spent through June 30th. By comparison, RA spent just $838,000 during the first 6 months of 2022. Of the total of 70 projects budgeted through 2023, 23 were completed by the end of June. Ongoing major projects include the rebuild of the Lake Thoreau pool, refurbishment of the Shadowwood pool, restoration of the Glade and Barton Hills tennis facilities, and completion of the Hook Road and Hunters Woods ball fields. In summary, for the period ending June 30th, 2023, the association cash position remains strong. There have been recreational registrations and other financial revenue sources are either at or above budget expectations. And while operating expenses are better because of salary savings associated with the number of unfilled positions, other operating expenses, as expected at the beginning of the very busy summer season, are slightly ahead of budget. This concludes my report for the month. If you have any questions at all on the financial or budgets, please do not hesitate to contact me at bodpetrine@reston.org, and I will respond to you as quickly as possible. Thank you.
Did you know playing tennis just 3 hours a week can reduce risk of cardiovascular disease by 56%? Some other health benefits include stronger bones, reduces stress, weight loss, and new relationships within your community. If you're looking to start this healthy lifestyle, Reston Tennis has some great opportunities for you. In our adult lessons, beginners are introduced to serve, volley, forehand, and backhand strokes, court positions, and tennis terms. Advanced beginners will review beginner strokes with an emphasis on stroke execution, introducing lob and overhead scoring and rules. Students must know basic strokes and forehand rallying. Intermediate students will work to perfect their strokes through drills with an emphasis on consistency, singles and doubles strategy, and match play. Tennis can provide opportunities for children to make lifelong friends, and their passion and motivation for the sport can be nurtured by creating a sense of fun. In our junior tennis lessons, our beginners and advanced beginner lessons are for ages 10 to 12 years old. These classes are intended for kids that are still developing their technical abilities and ball recognition skills. And for our team lessons, kids will enjoy tennis with their peers and learn the fundamentals of tennis techniques and strokes. Emphasis again is on fun, fitness, and play. We also offer lessons for those 10 and under. It's a whole new ball game. Balls, rackets, and courts sized just right for kids. It's all about play. Reston Tennis Youth classes focus on practice, learn, and play using the Quick Start format. Remember, we also have Reston Tennis Scholarships. We are pleased to work with the Friends of Reston 501c3 to support children through scholarships for a variety of year-round programs. This program is for children 17 and younger who are RA members. To learn more about tennis lessons here in Reston, please find the link in the description section of this video. Or contact Aaron Koenig at 703-435-6534. And don't forget, we have a pro shop here at Reston Association headquarters. Come in and see what we can offer you. Get out and enjoy this beautiful sport of tennis in Reston.
I'm Luana Farias, the Lakefront Coordinator, and we are at Lake Audubon Boat Ramp, and today we're going to talk about some activities that we can do out in the lake. So we have some great activities which include our regular stand-up paddle lessons, which occur every Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and then we also have a couple of special programs, including Yappy Hour, which you can bring out your dog and paddleboard with them, and then we also have sunrise, sunset paddles, and nature paddles, so you go out and explore some of the nature. New this year, we have several pop-up dates in which you can come down from 11 to 3 and rent out a paddleboard for an hour. We're excited to offer these opportunities down here at Lake Audubon, but don't forget we also offer different types of boats down at Lake Anne. We have a boat dock that offers single kayaks, tandem kayaks, paddleboards, and pedal boats, which you can rent out by the hour. We look forward to seeing you out here and enjoying the lake with this beautiful scenery in the summer.
Hi, I'm Ken Rosenthal, and I'm the Nature Center Manager here at Nature House, which is part of the Walker Nature Center in Reston, Virginia. We're hoping that with this video, we'll give you a good invitation to come down and check out what's going on here in the forest with the programs we have here and our special events. There's a lot of opportunities for you to connect with nature, to learn some new things, meet some new people, and have some great new experiences. We have lots of programming for every age, from 18 months all the way up to 101 years old. You can check them all out on the Branching Out publication from the Nature Center, from the Reston Activities Guide. We have a Facebook page, we have an Instagram page. All these places have information about our programs that you can check us out. So when we have something like this where you get out of your car here and you don't feel like you're right next to the parkway, you don't see buildings looming over you. It's trees, it's sunlight, it's songs of the birds, you hear the frogs calling. All these things are really soothing and they help you take a step back and take a deep breath. I'm excited with the staff we have here of the things that we're able to do. We lead several special events throughout the year and they're spread out that you can come and enjoy here, but we're also trying to make sure that we give you an experience that you can take with you. And I love the fact that we're here for people to ask questions. We get the emails, what bug is this? What snake is this? What is in my backyard? What dug this hole up? Hey, why am I having trouble with growing plants here? Or what's the plants I need to grow here? We have those answers and we want to make sure that people know they can come here and get those. We're only a couple of miles from town center and from Metro, and you're going to see and feel and hear the difference. It's even cooler. That's the best part about summer, is when you're in your shade, it's much cooler than when you're out on a lot of paved surfaces. I know you can find us on social media and you can do an internet search on us, but it's not the same as walking in. Come check us out. We're open 6 out of 7 days a week. We have a festival just about every quarter. Halloween coming up in October. Come and check out the trails. Maybe you don't want to talk to somebody because you're getting into nature and you want to get away from that and you want to get out and just have a more natural experience. Well, come check out our grounds. They're open every day. Come in, meet a staff member, say hi. We're going to give you something neat to explore or a really good opportunity to enjoy nature more. So visit Nature House, take a walk on the trails, come for a special event, come for one of our programs, but get out in nature, give us a chance to enjoy that nature with you, and I guarantee you're going to want to come back. There's a lot of neat things going on here, nature, programs, special events, and you're not going to get that from wherever you're watching this now. So come out into the heart of it and enjoy it with us.
Hi, I am Marco Rando, Director of STEAM Public Art Program at South Lakes High School, also an art teacher there, and we're looking at the 9th edition of Public Art from the STEAM team at South Lakes High School. The work is called Rise, and this is a commentary on the density that is occurring in Reston, the high rises that are happening. The colors represent the sunsets we see. It is also a commentary on keeping the balance and harmony of architecture, art, and our environment. So STEAM is the acronym for science, technology, engineering, art, and mathematics. It is a program that is implemented in Fairfax County Public School. We just so happen to have a very unique program that has a grassroots starting here at South Lakes High School. So while we're looking at a work of art, it is more than just a work of art. It is a collaboration. It is an opportunity for students to use the skills of STEAM in collaboration with their communities. Students learn about presenting to Public Art Reston's Art Committee and then Reston Association's Design Review Board.
Sides of the buildings on Rise are made of primary colors. The experience with the two mentioned architects gifted us a great help in guaranteeing that Rise would be truly a feasible concept.
Be sunk, be at least inside a box, if not be fully inside the structure, backlighting it.
Okay, great. Yeah, so presenting, since they're going to be in it, I think.
So in these experiences, students get firsthand of what it means to voice their ideas before working professionals. On installation day is a wonderful process. We have Reston Association and the students help load at the school. It is brought to the lake, and then RA uses their equipment to boat the structure out. Students are with a lake resident on a separate dock and oversee the process. So it is wonderful teamwork, and this relationship with RA over the years is just amazing. Well, we work closely with them, and the camaraderie is just a blessing. One of Rise's amazing fundraiser was this calendar that Mary Procknell, a local patron. People can donate to the project and receive a calendar. We will have another calendar edition next year, so look forward to that. And you can find that on Public Art Reston. While we're looking at a work of art that is relating to the environment, you also have students who are learning the skills of relating to their community more intently than they would if they were just in the classroom. For more information, to watch the process and progress of STEAM artworks, check out our Instagram, slakes.steam.art.
Hi, I'm Chris Shoemaker, Director of Capital Projects for Reston Association. We're here today at Hickory Pond where our dredging project is underway. This is part of our standard lake maintenance program where we dredge these ponds on an occasional 5-year basis. This protects our stream network, including Lake Ann Canal and Lake Ann itself. We do it on approximately a 5-year cycle, and next year will be Bright Pond as well as Butler Pond being dredged. This is on a much smaller scale, similar to the projects we've done at Lake Audubon and Lake Throw, where we also dredged accumulated sediment and disposed of it at a disposal site out in Loudoun County. The reason why we do this is it helps support our storm structure network, which prevents sediment from outflowing into the lakes. During major rain events, much of the sedimentation is trapped in these ponds, which prevents it from outflowing further downstream into the lakes. This is a relatively short project compared to other dredging projects and will be completed here in the next few days and reopening the site to users. This is just one of several other major projects we have ongoing this year, including Barton Hill Tennis renovation, Hunters Woods Ballfield redevelopment, the Shadowwood Pool refurbishment, and the Hook Road Park redevelopment. You can find more on these projects on the Capitol webpage at reston.org.
Recording in progress.
Move that the Reston Association Board of Directors certifies to the best of each member's knowledge that only those matters appropriate for executive session of a personnel or contractual nature were discussed or considered by the board during executive session.
So moved by Director Josh. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Director Petrine. Conversation. Ready for a vote? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Mr. Chair, I believe 3 of our directors are still in the breakout room.
Oh.
Oops.
Can you kick them out?
And then Director Dodd. Director Dodd, there we go. Director Dodd, Johnson, and Collins, that's fine. You unmute yourself there, Director Dodd and Director Collins.
Yes.
I have a
Yep.
motion, cleansing motion for the executive session.
Aye. Aye on that.
Aye.
Director Johnson? Aye. That motion carries unanimously of all those present and voting. Do I have another motion?
Move that in accordance with the association's policies on purchasing and procurement to approve the contract with Chadwick's, Washington, Morady, Elmore, and Bunn, PC, for legal services in the not-to-exceed amount of $350,000.
Second?
Second.
Second by Director Flashman. Any conversation, debate? If not, all those in favor say aye.
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 That vote is unanimous of all those present and voting.
Move to approve CEO goals as presented in executive session dated July 27th, 2023.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Director Petrine. Any debate? Hearing and seeing none. All those in favor will say aye.
Aye.
Director Collins, Director Johnson?
Aye.
Okay. Nay?
It is a nay.
Okay. Director Johnson votes nay. Everyone else votes aye. That motion passes. What are we on to now? Is this budget process and review?
Yes.
The floor is yours.
Thank you. Okay, everybody. I'm going to want to go through some information tonight, and I want to talk about the budget process. And I asked for 30 minutes, hoping that we would have substantial or sufficient amount of time to make sure we talk about process, what's coming next, make sure everyone on the board knows, when key decision points are. And for me, particularly since this is my first year through the full budget process, that we're achieving our budget policy objectives going into the final decision making. So you all may recall when we first laid out the budget calendar, I solicited feedback. I had been talking to the fiscal committee quite a bit, and then we talked with the board about wanting to set up as deliberate a decision-making process and methodical way of going about making those budgetary policy choices as possible, thinking about setting policy and then eventually whittling down from what can be a very, very large cafeteria of ideas to the final budget. So in order to accomplish that objective, we've already done some work, but there's still some important steps that are coming. We had been scheduled, according to our calendar, to have a June session with the board. We did not have that. The June session was full of a number of materials, so I'll be going through some of that tonight relating to process. And then we're also scheduled to give you all a year-to-date report on revenue collection and an end-of-year forecast, so I'll be doing that as well. I realize that everyone on the board got all the information in their packet. Members of the public may not have, so hopefully we have the presentation up and we can just kind of go through that for the members of the public. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on individual slides. I don't like to just bore everybody with PowerPoint death, but I do think it's important to speak to the board and to remind you all, particularly of the key things that are represented and or are coming down the pike. So when we first looked at this, and the first slide for those that are on TV speaks to the overview and the budgeting fundamentals that I think are important in creating the budget. This is a very unique budget from my experience because it is so heavily dependent upon staff and the provision of service through human interaction. And I'll get into some of the numbers there. And the reason that's interesting to me is that when you're in a service-based industry, from my perspective, the number one asset of the company is human capital and our ability to connect with a community in delivering that service. So there's sort of an overarching theme around when we look at budgetary decisions and talk about setting of goals and what the programs look like and thinking about operating and capital reserves. And of course, we only have some concepts for that. And of course, fiscal committee is thinking about cash reserve positions and other things as part of their work plan going forward. Nonetheless, the idea of what it means to be fiscally responsible, to be putting aside money when you have a reserve fund to handle certain capital expenses, what it means to think about continuing good service should there be a rainy day that comes. Those are the things that are very active in my mind as I'm putting together the budget. So if we jump to the next slide, there's two really important meeting dates. Not that every meeting that we talk about budget isn't super important, so I'm hoping the board's super excited every time we do this. But the first one was in May, and at that meeting, probably the most important thing was, even though we had a very long discussion that night, the adoption, and that's a formal term, the agreement around budgeting priorities, notably that we would be focusing on members, and we would be thinking about retaining the existing or improved service to members, as well as looking internally at some of the core services of RA, and I've got that on a different slide coming up. Now, what we did from there is start to take a look at a variety of different input variables and factors. I sent you all a memo probably 2 weeks ago now, which was July 14th, thank you, Erwin. Identifying tweaks to programs, new programs, considerations that are coming up that I plan on pricing out, building into your draft one budget discussion that comes in September. And I've got a little more information on that just to remind everybody, at the end. And then the other thing I'm going to mention maybe a couple of times, I sent you all an email on this and it appears in some of the materials, but we've been taking input from the community. There are member suggestions and all these different variables. The committees are looking at things. If there are individual board member suggestions, I need to know what those are, because if you decide you want me to look at them, I need to have some time to price them out and that sort of thing. I asked you all to try to have those over by August 1st so that as they can be discussed on August 16th and then potentially built into a draft one budget, I just can get that work done for you. So I'll just mention that here again. So on August 16th, probably the biggest thing we are going to do is ask for feedback and start to whittle down in a couple of areas. And I'm going to give you updates on where we're at and what we're thinking about relative to financial, projections and expenditures, and we'll be able to walk through, some different cost centers. Specifically on the feedback, we're going to be reviewing the member suggestions. And if you all recall from the May meeting when we talked about setting those budget policy priorities, the intent there was to be able to filter down the member suggestions for your consideration. So what I have done is filtered those we sent all the member suggestions to committees. So the committees have their relevant subject matter. So they're seeing, someone on a committee across the board is seeing all the suggestions. As a separate CEO exercise, I am filtering them down based on your budget priorities. So there will be a subset that I will give to you, and then I will also prepare what my recommendations are for you that are the ones I think you should be considering for incorporation into the budget. And then we'll have that discussion in August with the hope that as you have general agreement on what those items are, we can really sharpen pencils and start to price them out. The second part of the August meeting relates to the capital improvement, and that's really where you're going to see your first capital stuff. What I'm going to mention here is there have been a number of comments out there, so I'll ask you just to think about in preparation for August, the capital budget and the relationship of the community survey that's coming. There have been some projects that were contemplated or shown in 3 or 5 year CIP projections, potentially as 24 projects, and we will probably want to talk to you about whether you want to move forward with those and potentially price them out, or if you want to push them back for any number of reasons, but just be prepared for that. Yep.
I hope that in the course of doing that analysis, Mr. Cummins, that we take careful consideration into the recent zoning administrator's interpretation, because that would translate into what otherwise we would consider minor projects having to go through a long 3-year land use process. And I think that I would hope that in putting together the cap budget, we want to have a year or two of PRAC going through their process, and then 3 years of land use review with the county. So, in most cases, anything of any significance is 5 years away. And so I wouldn't want us to adopt a capital improvement plan that didn't take both of those processes into consideration. because I think it really constrains what we're going to be able to accomplish over the next 5 years, irrespective of what the survey tells us. And, you know, one of the things I think we need to do a better job at is setting expectations. And so that, as you've said, I think in these meetings, you know, if we get feedback on the survey that says, hey, we'd like the Good Ship Lollipop plopped down in the middle of Isaac Newton Square, that ain't happening for 5 years, because you just can't get there, given the processes that we are faced with. So as I talk to my fellow board members and talk to the community, we need to have that kind of lead time factored into a capital improvement plan, and most of our capital improvement plans, correct me, Director Petrine, are 5 years in length. So if we're looking at something that isn't going to happen for 5 years, it probably does, you know, maybe the only thing you show up on there is the bracket process, and not setting up an expectation where people are thinking we're going to redo, pick a facility, and it's going to happen within the next 5 years, because it's not.
So I think just a couple things to maybe, because a lot of what you're describing applies to the big projects. The CIP also includes a number of line items that we don't usually highlight. I'm not suggesting we're going to spend a lot of time on those things, but the CIP is a very large document. And this is really the first meeting where that's going to get to you in earnest. And I know everyone wants to talk about, is there going to be a big pool project, or is there going to be a tennis project, or, you know, those sorts of things. I think the intent for tonight, though, is to let you know that that's coming, and I certainly appreciate the comment, you know, that the timing and the implications of timing, either for our own decision-making or for external forces, whether it's permitting or whatever, are things we need to be taking account of.
Well, and I won't be here on the 16th, so I feel like that I need to put a pin there now so that we don't have unrealistic expectations of the membership.
Okay.
Director Flashman.
In any event, if we were to go forward or decide that we want to go forward with a particular project of some considerable size, it would have to be budgeted over that period of time during which you would be advancing the steps necessary to take it to conclusion. So you would have something in next year's or the 25th.
Agreed.
For that.
Agreed.
The other question I had is, could you, in your development of the response to community submitted suggestions, give us a full list at the same time as you give us which ones you are suggesting be accepted, and so that we know which ones have been left out, and perhaps have some discussion about why one or the other was not included?
Yes, absolutely. Yep. Okay. The other thing we're going to do on August 16th is have a discussion around the level of detail. So for the 25 budget, we do a biennial budget. I know that I struggled with that a little bit because I got here in the middle of August and it looked like a brand new budget to me, or at least in terms of the things that were getting discussed. I obviously have a much better sense of the relationship of the assessment and the budgetary process, which was something fairly new for me, just on an annual basis. So in the past, we have assigned a percentage above year one for year two, but those are the kinds of things that are going to come up. And so we'll just walk that through. Okay. The next slide is just the budget policy priorities for May 31st. I already covered those. I'm, of course, you'll see those in each thing. So, and once we get a strategic plan adopted, you will start seeing either symbols or the relationship of decision-making to those things. So it's just something I think is important as we get into it. If members come down, we talk about previous work, how it applies to current decisions, and then, you know, going forward. So I want to jump in a little bit, and some of these slides, many people on the board have seen several times, so I'm going to go through them fairly quickly. I think generally everybody on the board is well aware that 80% of our revenue comes from the assessments. I'm going to go through in a minute where we are in terms of assessment collection. One of the things that I'm not sure, you know, is as well known out there is some of the breakdown within the category. So when I think about transparency and what we do with our budget and how we articulate the metrics and services that are going to be achieved with this budget, I'm thinking about how we can tell that story outside of simply a spreadsheet. But going through that here, I don't think this will catch anybody off guard, you know, that most of our non-assessment revenue comes from the recreational activities and fee-based programs. Now, one of the things I'm going to mention a couple of times, we're in the middle of the summer, but we're starting to get some preliminary data around things that happened last year that we changed, like the fee schedule. And if you'll all recall, one of the things that I talked to you about, probably my first month, how elastic is the demand for non-member participation? So do they simply want to use our services, and if we push up the price, we simply generate more money, or do they go away? And then we have a non-assessment revenue problem, which just hits the budget. So generally speaking, we believe we're doing very well. I understand sometimes we get a late summer surge, so we're not really ready to talk about the full impact yet, but I will as we move into August on the revenue collection. On the operating expenses, again, no surprise to anybody, 70% of the expenses are salaries and benefits, and 80% of the people cost is full-time employees. We'll talk a little bit about attrition, later on. We are an organization that relies primarily on people to do service. You'll see it in a slide just a little bit later on, but I have talked to you all about wanting to look at seasonal dollars, whether or not it makes sense to use part-time employees in certain circumstances, or what the long-term business model looks like. This is a historical snapshot, and I think everyone's generally familiar. So we jump to the next slide. On the capital side, again, without getting into a lengthy discussion around CARF and triple RF, I think everybody's familiar that the fiscal committee, and I think a number of the board members have asked everyone to be thinking about or look into the definitions of those two funds, how money's set aside, and that is coming. For now, what you see on this spreadsheet are the approved projects, in the triple RF, and the CARF. And then, of course, I know there are a whole bunch of questions about that. I think the intent for this slide tonight was simply to tell the public that our capital is broken into those two things. Generally, triple RF relates to things required by the reserve fund and things that are ongoing maintenance, and CARF being new capital asset projects. And I know there could be a ton of questions, but that's mostly for the people watching at home. All right, jump to the next slide. From a cash standpoint, this has come up quite a bit, and we are doing some thinking about this. RA is in an exceptionally strong cash position right now. That's not always necessarily a good thing, but it's always good to have cash on hand if you need it. We've been running a surplus of a little over $1 million a year, and sometimes more than that, and project the same this year, and I'll get to those slides here in a minute. If you follow on the bottom, you'll see from 2020 to 2023, a significant jump from, say, roughly $4 million to a little bit north of $7 million at this point in time. Now, that raises some budgetary policy questions about how and why that's happening, and how we think about revenue collection, business expenses, whether or not our business model is reliable. So we're coming out of COVID, and do we believe those revenues are going to be sustainable in those programs going forward? Were they one-time things, and so forth. So all I wanted to show on this slide is the cash activity. The only thing about that $7 million number that gets thrown out there is there are some stream mitigation fees in there, which we believe have some restrictions on them. There are a lot of questions out about exactly how that works. I'm actually working on that with our finance folks to get that back to you. So it's not like we have a chest of $7 million. It's actually a little under $6 million. So, but I will get answers back for everybody. Yeah. Okay, moving on to the next slide. There's a lot of words on this slide. What I want to try to talk to the board about, this is information that we provided at each step in the game. We have been at the end of each year, and this certainly happened last year. So people have told me it happened in years past, so I'll just say that this is apparently has come up in the last couple of years. When we get to the final decision-making about what the assessment should be, or all the services that we want to provide and what the costs of those services are, there's been a discussion about using one-time money to buy down the assessment to make the increase of the assessment lower than it should be to provide that level of service. That is a strategy that works fine as long as you're planning on running surpluses routinely. If we get into fiscal policy making and decide that we want to true up some of our actuals or expenditures in a way that reduces that likelihood, we will not have that opportunity as much, because we will need the cash on hand for the rainy day fund. So we can't just use it every single year to make the assessment artificially lower than it should be for that level of service. And that's a big statement, because there's a lot of things that go into what that level of service costs, and therefore what it ends up being as an assessment. And I'll speak to that in the next couple slides.
Doesn't the use of those surplus funds represent a prepayment by the members?
Yes, and we've been doing it apparently every year.
Well, that's, you budget high and you end up with an assessment that's such and such amount, and then you don't spend it, and you have the savings generated, and if you use it to lower the future assessment, You asked, the members have actually prepaid.
Yes. Cut to the chase, it's not my recommendation to continue to do
I
that.
understand.
Yeah, because it does mask the cost, and if you don't have the cash on hand, now you have the
Then you can't do it.
enormous increase in assessment.
But you also have to keep in mind, for example, this year, we have $7.8 million in budgeted capital expenditures. And the cash, we have the cash. So even though we have seemingly a lot of extra cash,
We don't.
a great deal of it is already committed.
Right.
But it just isn't going to be spent this year,
And the 1.2 million for stream mitigation, you cannot spend.
except to remediate streams.
Then if you have a problem with streams that you are already committed to maintain,
Right.
and they suffer damage, then you're obligated to go, under the agreements, to go fix them. And that's the money you're going to use for them. So it can't be used for anything else.
Right.
Bob, do we make the obligations that you're talking about, the money that's already been obligated but hasn't been expended, do we make that either at least visible to the board? Do we make that more broadly public?
It's in curve cash and investments as well as triple RF cash. So you've got three different categories of cash, which is restricted, as well as Erwin points out, the CAT fund, which is.
So you could take the cash from each of those columns, basically, add them together and subtract from that $7 million, well, let's say the under $6 million number, because that would be the non-stream related.
Yeah, the 1.2 million is
Okay.
stream.
So, all right,
But
fair
it's
enough.
not 7 minus. It's a lot bigger number minus stream mitigation and triple RF.
Yep.
Because there's operating cash is at 7 million, not all cash and investments.
Triple RF money is not in that 7.
Right.
It's not in that.
Right.
Okay,
It's separate.
It's separate, yeah.
fair enough.
There's a lot more.
It's money that's already set aside.
Lots more to come on operating and reserve and capital. And I'll just leave with that point because it has been my experience that in the community and even sometime in the committees, those funds are treated as apples and apples, and they're not. They are apples, oranges, and probably pears. And my background has been to not talk about them transferring from one fund to another or under what circumstances you could, because there's commitments made to the public about what their dollars are being spent for, particularly around capital investments. So anyways, as those things come up, I'll just keep talking about them. All right, let's jump to where we're at now and end of the year position. So taking a look at where we're at for our cash position right now, we have a little bit less cash than we had last year at this stage of the game. The primary reason for that is we've been spending money out of the triple RF account. So we've got a lot of things going on, as everybody knows. But I'll just leave you with, we have a very strong cash position when we have almost $20 million, there. Okay, jumping to the next slide.
Okay.
Yeah, so looking at the accounts receivable, one of the things I think, well, I'll just say I am particularly interested in, I would hope any CEO would be interested in, taking a look at when 80% of your revenues are coming in via assessment, how does that process work? Are there any pitfalls in that process? I think you all know one of my pet peeve sayings is never make it hard for someone to give you money. We want to make sure that that's a streamlined thing. We are basically on pace right now. We're right where we were last year in terms of total assessment collection. To remind everybody, typically right about now, and we are sending those out, the demand letters, before we look at collections and that sort of thing. Historically, that typically will take that number from 91, 92% to 95, 96% in terms of assessment collection. The remainder then goes into collections, and then we either collect through that process or liens and that sort of thing. From a budgetary standpoint, once we're at that kind of number, we're hitting the revenue projection that we were expecting to get. All right, jumping to the next slide. This slide shows...
Mac, can we get back to the last slide, please?
Sure.
Thanks. Looking at the second bullet, the way I read that it looks like it represents two invoices represent 121K. I don't think that that's necessarily the case.
These are for apartment buildings?
Apartment buildings.
No complexes.
Yep.
Okay. When I read
Apartment units sounds like.
When I read units, I'm
Yeah.
reading as an apartment, not as a building.
Good feedback. Apologies.
Yeah, that got me too.
But I would ask, or I had on my list of questions, I was gonna save till the end, but since we're stopping on this slide, have we reached out to those 2 apartment buildings and talked to them? Because it's just, to be honest, it's wrong for them to be this late. I mean, they know it's coming, it's a corporation, it's not an individual budgeting, like, that's 121,000 in cash that we don't have in our bank account, and we should absolutely at this point have it in our bank account. So I was hoping that there was some personal outreach, and I know we have a resolution related to how collections is done, but those they're big dollars, and I would make some special reach out.
Tom Deal is on the phone. Tom, have you communicated with them?
Yes, one of the apartment complexes is going to remit before the end of the month, so that'll eliminate that. The other one, we had to go through Tony. There was some issues whether they were a government unit or not, and they were asking for the 50% tax credit, and I think we had that resolved, so we should be receiving that one soon as well.
Thank you for the update, appreciate it.
Okay. Do you have a question on that one?
No, carry on.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So this hopefully is a little bit more legible in the board packet for you to go through. What we did here was take a look at the year-end forecast and look at that against the budgeted numbers to see where, if any, there was going to be deltas. In the right-hand column, I tried to call out where the major discrepancies were so that you would all have a chance to see kind of what that looks like. And of course, I just took what looked like bigger numbers. If you have questions on some of the smaller, but still not insignificant discrepancies, we can talk about those as well. On the revenue side, taking a look, at the end of the year, the biggest discrepancy, and this shows up in the communications budget because the program used to be in communications, relates to sponsorship dollars. That, of course, be the subject of a discussion later on in tonight's agenda. That represents roughly $125,000 less in revenue than had been budgeted for. And then the stream mitigation revenue, of course, is substantially higher. So 550,000 or so there. On the expense side, if you go down to the bottom, that $794,000, we're seeing a lot of vacant positions and attrition. We have 2 vacant SLT positions now. Of course, those are much bigger dollars than when we turn over some of the other positions. So that really represents the lion's share of the delta. Of course, with the 2 pools not opening, there's some non-expenditure there. Again, that's generally labor, though. I wanted to just talk about that a little bit because it could be misunderstood otherwise. So when we thought we were going to need lifeguards and other sorts of things. So generally speaking, when we're looking out, the cash position is very strong. At this point, we think we're going to outperform revenue, and I'm going to talk to that, as a variable because it's come up in several places about looking at actuals and not just looking at last year's budget, and tacking on something for the following year. But nonetheless, for the 23 budget, we're going to outperform in some areas, and then we are saving money largely, as I mentioned, in personnel, which means we are likely to run a surplus of north of $1 million by the time we get to the end of the year.
Can I ask a quick question?
Please.
I'm seeing on total camp summary, opening of schools later than budgeted. Can someone explain that?
Laura, are you still on the phone?
I'm still on that chart, and I'm looking at expenditures.
Yep. Sorry, Lori.
On total camp summary.
I'm wondering if Laura Kowalski is on the phone. She may have had to step off. She's doing double duty.
She's driving.
She is.
So, Director Dodd, as it's been explained to me, is that the schools started earlier. They start in August now, and that takes away a session of camps that were previously budgeted and expected to participate. And now with the schools opening.
It's over budget.
But it says opening of schools later than budgeted. right? So
But it's the other way around,
it meant earlier.
right?
Yeah, it did.
Okay. Okay, thank you. I understand that.
Right.
And for the record, this is one of the first time that we're doing the forecast this early, and the fiscal committee asked for it to be in the same format as you guys are all regularly see in the treasurer's report, so that it would be easier for you all to read and have one format. And so that is Tom's plan for the next iteration of the forecast, is that we keep the same format of our financials going forward. And generally what that does is pull out people costs separately, because we know that's 70% of our budget, and you explain people costs and then you explain everything else. So it might be easier the second time we do a forecast to review it.
Okay.
Yep. So if we jump into the other considerations, I'll just reiterate that as we move through the budget process and we have all the better numbers, especially things like increases in personnel costs around benefits or better numbers on revenue collection from the different programs, we'll be updating you all and feeding that in. Okay. All right. So if we jump to the last section here,
Brittany, can we scroll forward a couple? Oh, Sean.
There we go. We don't have to spend time on the pictures, but they're always fun. I'm not going to spend any time going through, there's about 6 slides worth of information about very detailed program changes, some of which are really small tweaks and some of which are things that have become very popular and the members have asked for. And so you can go through that, and I'm happy to answer any questions if you have any now or at the other meetings. I want to get into the other items that are coming up and what you can expect relative to those. I've already talked about the member suggestions and how that process will work going into August. Recreation passes potentially being rolled into the assessment. That's a concept that came up in May 31st. The other ideas that have been floated in just various conversations are whether or not there is a financial strategy to, finance people use the term bleed in, but not have it hit the assessment all at once. So I'm looking at how that might work for your consideration. There have been ideas, and we are going to be looking at, I'll call it tactical, I used to use the term tactical urbanism, but trying new things down at Lake Audubon. We're actually going to be doing that either way, but talking about what a future operational dock and equipment would look like. The golf course recreation island, that along with Lake Newport Tennis encompass potential CIP things. Some of you have mentioned golf course island and whether or not now is the right time to be doing that. I've not lost track of that. So what I try to do is keep a list of everything the board members mentioned to me and say, I heard you, and it'll be on the list. And then I will try not to throw you any jump balls. I will make some recommendations on these things too. Just know that it's coming your direction in August. And then there are a couple of things that have also come up. I'll jump to the bottom. One of the things that came out of the elections process this year was a suggestion that perhaps we should be thinking about new ways to reach membership during the election, particularly for non-English speakers or members of the community that have not historically been voters in the community without knowing what that looks like. So one of the things that is out there is how we do outreach for elections and whether or not the board wants to consider setting aside some additional money. For what yet, I'm not sure, but that was a suggestion that came out of the elections process. And then certainly, of course, have talked about the board of directors and the CEO, and maybe you guys want to do a retreat or not, that concept's come up. Okay, I'll just mention as it relates to the staff, because I've already hit most of these items. We are currently looking to get a chief financial officer recruitment going quickly. Our HR department is working on all the various facets of that relating to benchmarking, looking at the the position, how it fits in the organizational structure and so forth. So I'll have more information for you on that probably in the next month. I've told you that I intend to convert the virtual CIO to a director of IT. I'm looking at the financial impact of that, if any, and we'll just have that for you as we move into the budget process. The next two are things that have come up that we are looking at and pricing out either at your request or something that I want you to consider as we move into the budget process. And then when I get into the presentations, as we get into August and or September, the analysis of the seasonal dollars that have been unspent and or potentially using part-time employees, and we're already experimenting with that right now. So many of you know Michelle Haney, who does some land use work for us. She also does some business analyst work or management analyst work for me. So for example, she was the key author of the organizational study, RFP, that just went out probably about 2 weeks ago now or so. So we are looking at where we can slide in part-time people, or where, should we have attrition at some level, whether or not part-time people make sense. And that's something that's been asked about. So we're looking into that. Don't need to spend time on the 2 CIP things. Talked about that already. And then the rest of this, I've given you information in the memo. I think for the folks at home, that's a public memo. You can see what all those things relate to. I don't think I need to spend a ton of time on this tonight unless you want to ask me, questions on those. Hopefully the intent of what those items are and why I want to put them in front of you, for consideration, whether we all decide to do them or not. I think they fit into where I see the strategic needs of the organization being, either next year or then moving into 25, and wanting to be ahead of that curve so that we can make really good decisions. So, and then the last slide, really just, there's some budgetary considerations that we're not likely to have a ton of discussion on, but you should know that are out there and I am tracking. So last year, one of the biggest things was exactly what inflation number should I be using. I mean, at the time, if you recall, we were looking at 8-9% potential inflation. It's not going to be anywhere near that number, but we're sitting down to take a look at that. Now, obviously, there's been a compounding effect going through this year, so that has an impact on the impact to the staff, and in terms of what the merit might look like. So I'm looking at the calibration, of all of those things as well. We did the insurance subcommittee. You all will recall the report, that came out on that. I'll just mention, hopefully that was a worthwhile exercise. I think the people that participated in it found it to be a really worthwhile exercise. I'm just thinking about, as we go forward, there's an educational component for that I know I learned a lot about. So as we get into, here are the numbers, I would imagine new board members that had no exposure to even the updates, it would be a good exercise because it's such an important part of our budget, especially around the dam insurance and things that go on at the lakes. So lastly, my commitment to you all is to be looking at not just how we've done things in the past, but the best way to do things. So when I look at the different revenue models and the cost centers, I'm looking at, are our revenue streams consistent? So I talked to you all about the assessment revenue and looking at how we do that and staying on target with that year over year. Looking at the non-assessment revenues, I've asked the department directors to put together business plans so that we have a better sense of what do our facility rentals really look like? What if we don't hit numbers? Who are we marketing to? How are we confident that that number is stable? Or are we budgeting too high or too low? And I think that's deliberate work that we haven't necessarily undertaken in the past, but I think is necessary work. So as we get into some of those, if you have questions about how that's going, please let me know. My intent would be that we have a budget that we believe in, and then look and hit those numbers, and then have metrics that go with it. So that's the update, and I think I would like to take questions, especially mostly on process, because once we hit August, we're going to be in a full gallop towards my first budget, which I'll deliver to you in September.
Director Joseph?
I have a suggestion versus a question. So this slide deck that you put together had almost everything you put in the memo that you wrote to the board about programs and activities. And in that slide deck, you had some pretty slides about programs and activities. I would love to see these slides and these slides kind of combined and sent out somehow to the membership before that August 16th meeting, so that we can generate some dialogue or knowledge in the community and potentially get some feedback from the suggestions, even at a high level. And I think especially at the programs and activities, whoever's in that specific activity might have, something to say about, how we might get more participation on something, or how we might, do it in an alternative way that we could consider going into the budget process. And also the member suggestions, and maybe not, not like literally verbatim what you got, but like a summary list of the member suggestions, like an RE News or, a link on Twitter, something that gets it to the members. And then to the board, from the fiscal committee meeting that we had last week, they said it would be very helpful if we came to that August 16th meeting prepared to give them a list of, we want you to do further research or analysis on X, Y, and Z. So you probably have your own list. We're going to have the member comments list. We have these slide decks, like really being vocal and clear on, I would like to see more on these things from each of us, so that we can kind of come to some consensus. Otherwise, they get lost in, the merit of what is the board interested in really looking at versus, it was one comment. And they only have limited time as well together. So if you can come prepared to be clear on what you'd like them to look at, that would be helpful. That's all I have. Thanks.
Just one comment on the last one. It's my intent to send out, I don't want to say instructions, but try to help facilitate that too with,
Nice.
Here's what we're really hoping to accomplish. And I agree totally. And that was a big comment from fiscal. As much, and to be honest, even if, hey, don't spend time on this, is every bit as important as trying to consent on the other stuff. Because once it's off the list, there's a smaller body of work for fiscal to be working on.
Well, Vice President Joseph, you'll have your work cut out for you on the 16th, and I will look forward to all of your accomplishments. Other questions and comments? Director Flashman, Director Petrine.
I just wanted to say I'm glad that you're going to try to do a realistic evaluation of what rental income might be and what it could be pushed to and how you would achieve that. Because in the past, we've had pie in the sky kinds of numbers literally pulled out of the sky without any basis, and the projections have been unrealistic, to be kind.
To follow it, I'll get to you. It also is a function, having somebody tell us, what do we need to add to our facilities to make them more attractive? I have gotten feedback from people who want to use Lake House that our kitchen stinks. It's inadequate.
It's poorly designed and doesn't.
Well, it doesn't have warming ovens. It doesn't, you can't really host an event there because our kitchen it isn't even as good as your kitchen at home. So that I would, look to an expert to give us some ideas about how to make that a more attractive facility to rent and get more income.
Let me just comment real quick on that, John. So yes, I've made that assignment. You'll also notice in one of my additional budgetary considerations that I would like to ask for some money to do some of that exact analysis. So it may end up being a two-pronged thing. So we're going to be much more deliberate in the 24 budget, but we may need to go get that help just because we don't have the expertise from a real estate marketing management standpoint.
Leasing or somebody who runs a function facility.
Right.
Director Petrine.
I'm going to be the financial party pooper. Number one, we have a drop dead date of August 1st for board and member suggestions. I think we should hold tight to that date. We've allowed it to drift into October in previous years. That can't happen because all you're doing is, creating chaos in terms of creating a budget. And number two, as much as I would like to think about things that we would like to do, I think we need to be very, very cautious about expanding programs and services that aren't member focused. We can make this a for-profit organization, but we would have enormous competition. And particularly when you talk about the lake house, that just the size of the site makes it difficult to do a great deal of variety.
Not just size, it's configuration.
Well, if you have to step down, you're more likely to fall down the stairs.
It's an invitation.
But that's aside. I think at least what my expectation for the 16th is, we lock down as tightly as we can what we have to do and what we expect to do in 2024 and look towards 2025 because this is a biennial budget as opposed to just tacking on an inflation factor to come up with the second year budget. That's my challenge to staff.
Director Grywich?
Apologies for the repetitive nature of this next comment, but I think Max said and this is a good thing, not a bad thing, that we're currently in a very strong cash position, probably 4 or 5 times. Putting my member hat on for just a second, when I hear that, I think that's really good. But then when I hear potential comments about not, the board considering to not offset assessment, I'm wondering where we truly stand on certain things. I know from going through these packets, I understand that we have certain cash minimums. I understand we have earmarks. I understand that we have to hedge on some of these obligations that are out there that just haven't been expended yet. So that strong cash position, I think it could be beneficial if it's not necessarily, I know it can be found in the spreadsheets, but if we are able to bring that number more to light in the PowerPoints moving forward of what we are actually referring to, like what we actually have to work with at the end of the day, it at least puts the members, the board, everybody on an even playing field as to what we are truly working with, either for your benefit or for that rainy day. Because as a business, we have got to establish a rainy day fund. That is not a crime to have money put away for a potential problem that could impact this organization. But at the same time, if we just say we're strong, we're increasing, and we continue to raise the assessment, or we don't offset the assessment in upcoming years, we're going to have a lot of questions to have to be answered. So that's my recommendation or my suggestion moving forward, is just we bring that number to light a little bit more clearly so that everybody is operating off that exact number and we don't have to go back behind the scenes and do the math and figure it out.
Dr. Dodd, Director Johnson, Director Collins, anything?
No, I just have found this a very useful discussion. I am not very experienced on dealing with big budgets like this, and so I just appreciate the thought that has gone into all of this. Thank you.
I have nothing to add. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Cummins. I'm going to ask unanimous consent to skip over items N and O in view of the hour because I'm shooting to get out of here at 9:30. And let's go to item P, and then we can come back to N and O. Is there any objection? Hearing and seeing none. Oh, yeah. Good luck. Okay, do I need to make a motion, Director Josai? Okay, so that was facetious.
Just so you know.
Okay. All right, go ahead.
Okay, so we're on to the
Business development strategy. Since you're coming back to us with a budget in August, you probably want to talk about this issue. And we've carried it over for 3 meetings?
3 meetings.
3 meetings.
Yeah. I want to talk to you all about this issue because I think there is some concern, or I'll just say there have been questions that have been asked about the nature of this program and representations about the revenue that was going to be generated from this program and therefore expectations that have been set. And I have definitely felt at times like there are some very key questions about this program that I need to get answered so that I can be comfortable deploying the program manager. As you all know, it was probably about December or January, I moved the person that oversees this from a different department, into my office. And we did that on purpose. That program may have been somewhat isolated just from an operating department oversight standpoint. So when I started to look into this program, and then anecdotally, some of you have talked to me about this program was somewhat sold as if we do this, it will pay for itself, it will generate enough money that the assessment, there's a relationship between the assessment and the amount of dollars that will be brought in. And that has obviously not happened. So, and it's not close to happening. So I showed.
Would it be fair to say it's not going to happen anytime soon?
It is not going to happen unless if you were to go back, and I'm recreating some history here, but when I look at the what was discussed for example, in 2019 is when the program got up and running, and the original sponsorship goal was $300,000. And that was based primarily on creating, now whether or not the board was involved in this or not, selling naming rights and windscreens and signage at ballparks, fields, pools, pavilions, the nature center, lake house, conference center, those sorts of things. I generally call those low-hanging fruit because a lot of companies would love to have pick a Brown Chapel field, sponsored by Google or, some sort of company. And then it moved on and actually the goal number was reduced in 21 and 22. And then of course, earlier I mentioned that we're about 125,000 short, at this point for the 23 budget number.
125,000 short out of what budget number?
I think it's only like 130,000. There has not been a ton of money that has come in.
So we've made $5,000 on the exercise.
But not entirely. And the reason for that is there have been substantial.
You mean it's better?
No, not necessarily. I think the question is how you define success.
Okay.
So there have been a number of monies that have been brought into Friends of Reston, which is our 501c3. The biggest reason that the companies are telling us that they want to donate money to Friends of Reston is for tax purposes. And without getting into that, that's what they're telling us. Now that money flows back to RA because Friends of Reston, by composition, is not allowed to give the money to anyone but RA. So what that allows us to do is have extra sponsorships or, kids that can't, like last year we helped fund kids that couldn't afford not only the passes, but they couldn't get swimsuits and goggles, and so we do a lot of things with that money. That does not have the relationship to the assessment, though, that I think was the philosophical discussion point in why this program originally got created. So ultimately, before I go out and try to hit the revenue number, sell ball field naming rights, which 6 of you, or maybe all of you, have told me should not be being done, I see an impasse coming. So that's the reason I've been trying to get this in front of you. We know we're not going to hit the revenue number. That's the reason why. My question is, what's the best way to go forward? I want to just comment, I do firmly believe that having someone help out Friends of Reston, so the person in this job spends approximately half their time, and this goes like this throughout the course of the year, but half of their time as the sort of the CEO of Friends of Reston, there's no one to do the work for Friends of Reston. So just propping them up, creating packets for the chairperson, all those kinds of things. She's doing all of that. And then the other half of the time is spent here at RA.
But
now,
RA is funding that,
that's right.
Not Friends of Reston.
No, that's right.
Okay.
That's right. RA is funding it.
Just clarity.
Yeah. So the value to RA in that program is that Friends of Reston has staff and she is housed in the building. So the reality is she is here, doing all that work. The money just flows into us in a different way than I think was originally anticipated. Now, I'm not going to say that we have generated $200,000 or $300,000. I also believe we don't get to those kinds of numbers unless the board wants to talk about things like naming ball fields. So anyways, that is why it's here. I laid out questions, in the packet. What I really want to know from you all as I look to deploy her in a more effective way, are there things that are totally off the table? Because if there are, I need to know that. And then I'll work on what it means for the revenue part of it.
Director Flashman.
I just want to add a historical note, and that is that the Lake House, as you may know, has a sponsorship from Comstock. And that was done when the Lake House, or shortly after the Lake House was purchased. And it was done by the CEO without the intervention of the board, I believe. And so there was a considerable amount of money that was given, but the money was used up almost immediately on the lake house itself and the overrun that resulted. So I am personally not enamored of the idea of giving away naming rights. It's a one-time benefit, unless you have them, if they want to keep their name, giving annually. But that's a hard sell, I think, and I really am not enamored of that.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of ways to structure those contracts. It's not usually annually, but you can have an end date too. You can get cell phone companies to put up new ball field foul poles and then have naming at the bottom. There's a lot of different ways it can go. But if you go around and look at our fields, the other issue I did not mention, but I understand it became a big issue at DRB as well at the time. So the board punted back and forth between DRB. I'm told DRB had serious heartburn about that concept also.
Director Johnson.
I'd advocate for anything to be on the table except for naming rights. Naming rights, I think, are, I find them distasteful. But especially in a relatively small community. But anything else, I would say should be on the table.
Anyone else? If not, I have a few. Go ahead.
I agree. I think that there's not a whole lot that I would take off the table except permanent naming rights. And then some of your questions about the expectation. I think the board's expectation is what was put in the budget. I think that the concept, when it was presented when you weren't here and was approved by the board, was that we were hiring a position, we were going to obtain this money. If we feel like that's not the case, then I think that the board's position back then, unless we change it, would stand, which is the position should be covering more than what we're paying the position to do. And I understand that since then, some responsibilities have been shifted and because Friends of Reston support was not part of that position when it was originally funded. But, you know, I guess you could take the portion that you think that Friends of Reston, you know, support we give them and put that into net revenue calculations. But generally that was the stance of the board, and I don't think that it's changed.
Okay, just a very short historical, if I may.
Please.
When the position was created, the executive director had grandiose ideas about what money could be taken from Friends of Reston and put to use by RA. And those ideas were way beyond the bounds of what is permitted to Friends of Reston. And so the limitations that exist on how Friends of Reston may spend the money, even if it's only for the benefit of RA, are significant. And the ideas that were had originally for this position, with the idea that there would be all sorts of expenditures available from Friends of Reston, just was unrealistic.
I totally agree, and I just want to make sure I'm asking the right questions. This position came in with a set of expectations that were premised on things that this board does not want to do from a value-based situation. Whether or not the board at the time knew, everything I have found indicates that the game plan was to go sell naming rights. Now, whether or not
That's not what's in the plan, though.
So,
Facility sponsorship, camp scholarships, program sponsorship, signature event sponsorships. They were sponsorships. They weren't permanent naming. Like, that wasn't in the plan. And any information that I see that the board received back.
Yeah, I understand.
I feel the obligation to address the question as follows. That board got scammed, and there's no other way to describe it. And it's part of the reason I lose my mind when I hear this phrase, non-assessment revenue. That person came in, your predecessor came in promising that there was going to be all kinds of non-assessment revenue in order to keep the assessment down. And so we play the shell game saying, oh, by the way, Google's going to come in and get the naming rights to the Brown Chapel Little League field and pay us the $300,000. It was never going to happen then, and it's not going to happen now. Is it possible that my law firm might buy a banner for the outfield at Brown's Chapel? Okay, I've done it for the concerts at Lake Ann. That's not going to do enough money to pay Brittany's salary for a week and a half. And you deserve more than that. So, first of all, I think this whole concept is a pipe dream. And it's nonsense. It's why I have this problem with continuing to talk about camp and activity revenue as non-assessment revenue. You know, let's be serious here. It's camp and activity revenue. And so as I sat out there listening to this song and dance, I'm going, what grade of marijuana are you smoking? Because that's what it was. They were smoking dope. I mean, and so this whole exercise was nonsense from the jump. What do we do with it now? I don't think there's any member on this board who wants to see the Browns Chapel Little League field brought to you by Marlboro or anybody else. And if somebody disagrees with me, speak up.
Marlboro can't advertise like that.
I understand.
So you're speaking naming rights.
I'm talking name, I don't think there's anybody here who wants to see naming rights. Is it possible that we could make a couple of quid here or a couple of quid there, hanging a banner on the outfield of Browns Chapel 1, 2, or 3? Okay, God bless. Okay? But we're never gonna hit those numbers. And it's just not gonna happen, Mac. And I mean, I just wish we just, stop kidding ourselves and stop kidding the membership. It just ain't happening. And so I don't think we need to get involved in a long rend our garments kind of conversation about what is value-based and what we can live with. Because we need to redeploy the asset. And I just remember Mr. Aiken during the Gulf of Tonkin discussion. We need to declare victory and go home. In this case, we need to acknowledge defeat and go home. It ain't just happening. And we need to, unless somebody jumps up and tells me I'm out of my mind, which happens at least 3 times a day, I just think we need to say this is not going anywhere. And it certainly is not going to have a major impact. We have 24,000 homes, right? In order to reduce the assessment by $1, we need to raise $24,000 net. Does anybody here think we're going to reduce the assessment by $4 in this exercise? Because I got money that says it ain't happening. And so it's kind of like, can we put this dog to sleep because it's crippled?
Just to complete, that was the direction of the board that hired the last CEO, was to increase, that was his primary goal when he was hired, was to increase, quote, non-assessment revenue. And I don't think anybody really considered, and certainly the fiscal committee was not asked to evaluate how long it would take or the likelihood of achieving the numbers that were projected. But staff did put a lot of time and thought into coming up with ideas that they thought would sell. But I think that, I think that day has passed, and I agree with you, John. To keep it really short, no, it's not a source of revenue.
Director Flashman?
Just to make an adjustment to your metaphor, if I may. This is not a dog that's crippled and needs to be put to sleep. It was stillborn.
Well done. Well said. Well said. Thank you. That was much more accurate than more accurately reflects my thought, Director Grouch.
With the potential, I'm trying to better understand what happens to that scholarship money or that community service money, or
it's still an FOR.
It's still okay.
Right.
There is no overlap because of.
We won't lose it.
No,
it is used for those purposes of scholarships primarily, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
It's brought into their budget that rolls under our budget.
Without the effective oversight or CEO type responsibilities, are we going to effectively be able to move that money to where it needs to go? Collect it, organize it,
It goes where it needs to go.
Okay.
That happens now.
It happened, yeah.
It happens now.
I just want to make sure I'm
And
clear
it
on
happened before this position and
It
this plan
happened
was
before the
created.
position, and so it will continue after
Right.
whatever decision is happened.
Right.
Friends of Reston has a lot of money. It's not poor. But there are limitations on what they can do with it.
Right. The scholarships won't change, that's his question.
Director Johnson, Director Dodd, go ahead. Director Dodd, go ahead.
Todd now, or?
Yep.
Okay.
It's you.
So please correct me. It sounds like no assessment income goes into our scholarships to help
Correct.
low-income folks. Because that all that money comes from Friends of Reston. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes.
And I had not known that, and I mean, why should we not take some of our assessment income and use it for scholarships? I mean, I don't really understand. I understand that there are corporations that want to give to FOR because they get the tax break. And so maybe that's the answer to my question.
Correct.
But to me, Restonians should support lower income Restonians. And there should not be a requirement that none of that money can come from assessments, in my view.
It goes from FOR to RA to fund the camps. And yes, that's the reason why a 501c3 exists, is to be able to make that transaction tax-free and give the advantage.
And I can't, I just sit here and I'm listening to the corporations. When we bought, my law firm bought the sponsorship of the concert series last year at Lake Ann, okay? We took the tax deduction as advertising. I didn't need it to be a 501c3 organization. Most businesses will take it as a marketing expense, not as a charitable deduction. They have limitations on charitable deductions anyway. They can only take, I think, 50% is my memory of the actual. So for a corporation to come to us and say, no, I'd rather give it to FOR because they get the tax deduction, I'm like, what do you do? It's their issue. It's really individuals who benefit by having FOR be a 501c3, because I can't write a check to RA and get a tax deduction. I can't get it from my assessment. But if I write that check to Friends of Reston, I do get the deduction. So the 501c3 characteristic of Friends of Reston is really directed at individual contributions, so that if I want to support the swimming scholarships that you're talking about, Director Dodd, I actually get the tax deduction. Whereas my law firm would cut the check and would expense it as advertising or marketing.
So can I jump in? The question that I wanted to put in front of you all, because I know we're not going to hit the revenue number, nor have we since the inception of the program. I do not look at this position as a, for lack of a better term, commission-based position, but I hear comments like that is an expectation. And this position has never been close to hitting that number because of all the things that we talked about earlier. This program adds tremendous value to the community, whether it's general funded, or elsewhere. But no, it is not going to pay for itself so that the assessment doesn't have to kick into a salary expense.
Do I hear you right, though, that there is value in this position from the FOR side? And we're not going to realize any kind of expectation on the advertising marketing side, getting marketing funds and advertising funds for banners and on the outfield. We're not looking at $100,000 for those banners, Mac.
No, you're definitely not looking at that. So from a pure revenue generation standpoint, probably not. I think that from a sponsorship standpoint, the question is what kinds of events is RA going to do? And now we're talking about making sure they're all member focused, not, bringing in whatever, that would generate those kinds of dollars. However, the position also does a lot of coordination around events with Laura Kowalski's group. Now, some of those are Friends of Reston's, but frankly, there is a reciprocal, Laura needs help with event,
So what's before the board is not whether or not to eliminate the position. That's your job. That's not our job. And to redeploy the position is, again, your job, not our job. What I understand you're asking us to do is to give you an expectation and to describe to you that, A, we're not interested in going down a naming rights rabbit hole. And I don't see anybody jumping up and down saying they can't wait to rename the Brown Chapel Little League field for Comstock, right? Looking at you, Director Collins and Director Johnson, and I don't see you disagreeing with that. So I'm going to ask Ms. Copeland to note in the record that there was unanimous consent not to pursue naming rights unless there's an objection, because I'm trying to get us done.
So maybe I can summarize and.
We don't need a vote for that, John?
I know, I don't. You want a motion, Director Collins? Director Collins, you're muted.
I am pro naming rights. I'm gonna just go out on a limb there and say, fine, it doesn't bother me in the least, but I don't think we have to vote on it.
Grant.
So here are the things that I just wanted to confirm. The board's not interested in naming rights. You are interested in short-term things. When you say sponsorships, those are short-term things, not like big permanent signs and stuff. And that the likely solution that I will be bringing back to you is a more realistic number that you see in that sponsorship account. It's just going to reduce the revenue projection in the 24 budget.
Is there any objection to the CEO's proposal? Director Josek?
I think that it's worth going back to the motions that the board had back then. I know it was part of the discussion that that position was tied to being kept if this revenue was achieved. Whether it's in the actual motions, I think it's been so long ago that someone would have to go and look. And I agree that we're not here to tell you what to do with your positions, but that position was literally added because of this program. I will also go out onto a limb and say, I actually think there's a lot more money that could be made than what was originally in this budget. Based on sponsorship and advertising, we have 60,000 member eyes, and that is valuable. Eyes are valuable. Our issue is we were not set up to have our eyes look at the things that people would purchase, and we're still not set up to do that. And so until we are set up to have eyes on things, especially in an electronic way, because that's where the big money is these days, I don't think that the program can stay as it is, but I would welcome you to bring us back. What do you think we should do with the program? And is it just cease it? And how are we going, to kind of cover that revenue in any way that you can think of that we have been putting in our budget now since 2019? And if goes missing in 2024, a couple $100,000 is assessment dollars that the members are going to see. So finding some alternatives to how we can make it up would be welcome.
Director Flashman.
I find myself, strangely enough, in agreement with the president. Hard to believe, nevertheless. There is a large potential amount of money that would be available to us if we focused and accomplished it in a proper way, on which we may have disagreement, that is available potentially to us, and that is the inclusion of developments and becoming members of RA. That is the largest single potential that we have available to us that would be extremely meaningful on a year after year basis, as well as by proffers for athletics and other kinds of things in addition to their membership. And those are the two most prominent sources of revenue that is in a way non-assessment, but will turn into assessment in part. Obviously, the proffers is not assessment money. It would be money that would be usable for development of capital facilities. And so if we are, it's a sort of a gamble in the sense, well, maybe we'll make it and maybe we won't. But it is, I think, in my estimation, something that is worth the gamble, and dedicating some resources to that, as opposed to what is, comparatively speaking, small amounts.
Great alternative.
Okay, so just as I'm trying to make sure I'm clear, the board's going to expect a program that's still going to generate the same amount of money as is in the budget to be proposed later in the year. So I have 90 days to put that
I don't know
together?
where you're hearing that from.
Okay.
I'm not suggesting that it would be in the budget. I am suggesting that you would expect to have hundreds of thousands of dollars in the budget as a result of this kind of activity. But you might want to set aside some money that would, I'm not sure how you would make a judgment about how much money it would be, because that has to be thought out clearly, and what activities you would undertake in order to achieve this end. But it would be an end that would be worthy of expenditure of some kind.
I think it would take special, if not legal assistance to go after proffer money.
Actually not. It's political.
Well, it is
Purely political. There's no legal element to this, to that exercise. Well, it is purely getting our membership to understand that the supervisor is shortchanging us and needs to help the membership.
But the legal side of it is that the owners of the property by right don't have to, if they
Not by
don't
right.
have to be.
Sorry, not by right. Not by right. They are coming in for a legislative act that is at the discretion of the board. And if the board says, unless you make this agreement, we are going to deny your application, that is, the board is free to say that and free to follow on with that activity. So this is a purely, and anybody who's told you differently is misleading you. It is a purely political decision by Walter Alcorn.
Okay.
How about we do this, because the business development program's not likely to
No, I'm
be
not gonna-
the skill set to
We can-
take
we
this
can
on.
discuss.
I just want to make one observation with regard to the approach. And the approach I think that would work best is one that we can show to the county and to us that it is clearly a win-win for everyone.
Hasn't worked so far.
Well, we have to talk about it in more detail, but
True.
rather than beating our heads or someone else's, I think some sort of cooperative approach which shows that we can, everybody gain and benefit from it would be more productive.
It starts with, if you don't ask, you don't get.
I'm not
We
saying you
haven't
don't
been
ask.
asking.
I'm not
But
saying you don't
we're
ask,
on
but
a
it's-
business development discussion, and that's a business development alternative. Instead of going after windscreen sponsorships, do we go after long-term assessment money, right? That's the value
Right.
proposition that we're making.
And another element, you forgive me, another element of that, which is along the same lines, is marketing the people who live in apartments in the TSA to come buy a membership, a seasonal membership. And how do we price it so that out of those 3,000 units that already are approved, that some number of them come by, because you had an experience where one of those tenants wanted to join RA. And so the answer is buy the seasonal pass. And can we use this person, since the board I'm hearing tell you that we don't want to sell naming rights, is it worthwhile to take that person's hours, right, and focus it on marketing to the tenants of those buildings, those 3,000 buildings, marketing them a seasonal pass, and increase our non-assessment revenue by increasing our non-member seasonal passes. And to me, even if we aren't successful with the politics, that's another way of enhancing our revenue by engaging in that marketing exercise.
We created the non-member broad pass last year, or for this current year.
Right.
And so the question is, one of not creating it, but marketing.
So I think you're hearing the board say, yeah, that's not where you want to be going. You want to be going in a different direction, and we don't have the revenue expectations. And how you deal with the personnel exercise there, it's not for us to say. We can't tell you. But it seems to me that that asset can be she's a friend of my daughter, so I can't, but how you redeploy that asset is for you to decide. But I think the board is of consensus that this ain't working, it's not gonna work, we need to go take that asset and redirect it. And we look to you, if I'm speaking on behalf of my fellow members, to come back to us with how you intend to redirect it. Do you need more from us?
Nope, I will get to work on that.
Okay, I just, there's a desire to have clear instruction from the board. I just want to make sure you're getting it.
Well, I'm getting qualitative clear direction. I just want to make sure, maybe I'm not misunderstood. When I produce a draft one budget, there will be less revenue shown, because that is occurring 45 days from now. So
I think that's the function of the first pass at the budget is, what can we What can we expect to do with the resources that we have as they are currently deployed or initially decided to redeploy, assets?
And the prior revenue projections from that position have been a fantasy, and they haven't been accomplished. So why do we keep doing the same thing over and over again?
They've been built into the budget though, guys.
Yeah, and we're saying,
And you're
don't
looking
do
at
it.
a couple $100,000 of net
Or something.
revenue. Lori has her hand up.
Lori Dodd.
Sorry, I was just going to say, Jen had suggested earlier that we look back at the resolution when the position was created and was it intended that it would be almost a commission, you're going to earn your salary by selling these sponsorships. And to me, that is not the question, because we do have a situation where our board continually changes as people rotate off and new ones are elected. And so when we recognize that a prior board made a decision that was based on a fantasy of a revenue that was never going to be realized, that we have to make adjustments. And we don't look back to, well, what were their assumptions at the time? We acknowledge that there was a miscalculation made then, and we are using the information that we have gathered now with our benefit of the passage of time, and we are deciding that that was not a realistic decision. The position may be needed with other justifications, which we're asking Mac to explain to us how that position can be best used to the services of the Reston Association. But the income that had been projected for that position is no longer an expectation of this board, which has opened its eyes to situations that the prior board had mistakes about.
I think that's fairly stated, and I don't want to beat this horse to death. Are we ready to move on, or is there somebody else who desperately needs to have a further comment here?
I just want to state for the record, I don't think there's consensus. I think there's board consensus that this plan isn't working. I don't think there's board consensus that that net revenue should or should not be in the budget.
Well, let's ask.
If it's not coming from that source, then how would it be in the budget? Revenue has to have a source.
No, the question posed by Director Juszak is, do we include that $300,000 of revenue in next year's budget? And is there anybody who wants to see that in the budget that gets brought to us, besides Director Juszak, that wants to see that in the budget that Mr. Cummins brings to us? Because there's a suggestion that there's not a consensus here. I perceive that there is, but besides Director Juszak, anybody else want to see that revenue item?
It's the net revenue.
Excuse me?
Net revenue.
Does anybody
You guys are
want to see
missing-
that net revenue item in the budget going forward, or are we prepared to give up on it?
I think one of the issues that you run into is the way this year's budget was created. So all that revenue and offsetting expenses, or the expenses and the offsetting revenue, are in communications, which included member services. So to be fair, you have to pull them apart.
The line items.
And in terms of the question that you raised, should it be in there? No.
Does anybody else think it should be in there? I don't see anybody else who thinks it should be in there. I'm posing that question. I'm not going to get into another conversation that goes on for half an hour.
I would not want to see it there unless there were a very clear justification for it. There isn't, that I can see at the moment.
I'm trying to give our CEO clear direction. I have one board director who doesn't believe there's a consensus. I can't have nuance. We don't have, so it's either yay or nay. Yay or nay?
Nay.
Sorry?
Nay.
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 Director Petrini?
Nay.
Director Dodd?
Nay.
Director Collins?
Yeah, aye. I do want to see it.
Okay. Director Johnson?
Nay.
Director Juszak?
Aye.
You have your instruction. Okay. Oh, it's 9:40. We have not reached board operations and board governance, nor have we talked about land use. I had hoped to initiate a
Lake equity.
conversation. I'm sorry?
Lake equity.
Lake equity. Kind of like equity. You asked to pull it off.
I did. So the last time this came up, the direction from the board was to take another look at the write-up, loosely called a charter, although as I looked at it, I spent quite a bit of time with Irwin. So he asked me to get together with Irwin, take a look at the charter and come back tonight with the intent of potentially adopting something, and then doing interviews at the September BOC meeting and then advancing into the work itself. So Irwin and I met, and I'd say we had a very good conversation about some of what his ideas are, taking over as the champion for this particular committee after Sarah's resignation. There are still a few things out there that I raised for Irwin that I think are still unknowns, particularly as it relates to, there's two different roles that the staff are being asked to play as currently written up. One is as committee member or work group member, and then one is staff creating work product in the conveyor belt that goes into creating a monthly, or as Irwin and I talked, maybe more than once a month committee meeting. So the concern I have is in the composition, having two SLT members assigned to not only attend and participate and weigh in on policy as a committee member, but it is unclear, and Irwin suggested maybe they should just be that person that's also responsible for doing all the background research, creating materials, and bringing things to the group. Is that a big thing or a small thing? I don't know, because we also talked about maybe creating some guardrails or making the deliverables more clear in the write-up. I won't speak for Irwin. He thought it would be better, what I heard, he thought it'd be better if they had their first couple meetings, and there's certainly value to that. If we go down that road, though, we're signing up for this work group that needs to be staffed at a time that the HR director is moving into the busiest time of the year, and our covenants department is frankly always busy. So just thinking about the two individuals, that was my primary concern. Are they going to be asked to be the conveyor belt? So for those of you that are liaison to other committees, what Laura Kowalski needs to put together so PrAC can happen, and what Tom Deal and team needs to put together so fiscal can happen, it's that body of work being thrust on department directors during their busy time of the year. I just don't know what that looks like. And so that was the issue that I had raised.
Director Flashman.
I had given some thought to what this might look like, and one of the things that I wanted to do is to meet with each of those three directors to get some ideas from them. My intention was not to have them become staff, with one exception, and that would be the person who's in charge of lakes and the reason, Ben Rhodes. I have seen his work in terms of doing minutes for the EAC, and I think he does a fine job. And that would be one of the functions that I would like to assign to him as a member of the group. But I do want to have a chance to meet with each of them, and I have talked with Mac about that, and he has said, go ahead. So I have one meeting already established, and I will establish the other two shortly. And these are meetings to get a sense of where we might go as a working group, not to foresee or set up, predetermine where the group might go. That will come from the group. And so I want to leave it as open as possible for the group to have the freedom to determine where it is that it thinks it wants to go. And in the absence of that, be prepared to suggest to them directions they might go. I do not see that there'll be a need for a lot of staff work initially. And one thing that was pointed out to me by Mac was that at some point with the recommendations that might come forth, there may be a need to cost out what it would mean. And that can either be done simultaneously with the recommendations to be presented to the board, or once the board has said, yeah, these three we're interested in, the fourth and fifth we're not. And then we can cost it out. So there are two ways to approach it. And that can be determined at that point, which is somewhere down the road, not immediately, nor in the time frame in which Mac is concerned about the use of resources where they'll be heavily involved elsewhere. So other than the inclusion of myself as a member of the committee, at this time, I don't see a major change in the direction of the resolution.
Director Joseph.
I move to request Director Flashman to review and refine where needed the existing charter for the Lake Equity Working Group and propose additional efforts to attract applicants for the openings on the working group for review and consideration by the full board no later than September 7th, 2023 special board meeting.
Second.
Is there discussion?
Is there a second?
Oh, I thought you were seconding.
No, I don't do that.
Well, I thought you were excited.
Second from Director Johnson, second by Director Dodd. Yes?
I'm sorry, I don't know if Jen's microphone was on. I was not able to get a clear understanding of the.
I read the motion that was in the consent calendar packet that we skipped over because we put this on the agenda.
Right.
And I was happy to second that.
And Travis says he seconded.
All right, so moved and seconded. Moved by Director Jussack, seconded by Director Johnson. Discussion. The maker of the motion gets the first. You made the motion.
I know it was pulled off the consent, but I'm not really sure why. Like, what are we trying to address by pulling it off the consent calendar? Like, with the conversation that's already happened, I'm like, but we were kind of sending you off to like do some research and figure out what to do and bring us back something. And from the discussion that I heard, I don't know what has changed.
The reason it was pulled off was to allow MAC to express his concerns about use of staff.
Okay.
Essentially.
Right. So we could do that next month in September, unless it's like use of staff as Irwin researches it, or use of staff for the working group.
The latter, and so as Irwin and I talked, he would like to progress forward with the write-up you have, and I think that's somewhat of an open check relative to department directors' staff time, especially as the working group starts and with an undefined deliverable. And so the question that I wanted to raise is, this could place an impact on other organizational priorities, and as we get into it, my recommendation is not to take that course of action, right? And not to take that course of action. It would be good for me if we're going to set up a committee to have a clear expectation about what the deliverable is, what the workload is, when you expect those things, not start a working group and figure it out as you go. And then I have to come back and say, sorry, we have to stop this work group or stop this other thing. That to me doesn't feel like a good way to manage the staff resource.
But this motion is.
Can I beg your pardon?
Go for it.
I'm trying to maintain order
Go
here.
for it.
Council, seems to me we already voted to have this working group.
Yes.
Okay? Then we tried to staff that working group.
Yes.
And we were not successful in staffing that working group. So, bear with me. Bear with me.
But when you say staffing, you mean recruiting
I'm
volunteers?
trying to collect my thoughts, Director Dodd, if you
Sorry.
could give me a minute.
Of course.
So, it strikes me that if somebody wants, whether it's the CEO or Mr. Flashman or Director Jussack, wants to go back and revisit that motion, that's the appropriate thing to do at this point. And that somebody needs to come forward with a revision to that initial motion or a proposal to rescind that motion. And that's not here. This doesn't go there. We're stuck with what we adopted. I understand our CEO's concerns, but that ship has sailed. If the CEO is going to propose to us that we rescind that motion, bring that proposal forward. If Mr. Flashman believes we should revise that motion, bring that proposal forward. But I don't see how this relates to what we've already done as a body. And is this an amendment to what we already voted on?
It is.
Hang on. Go ahead.
Yeah, it is. Let's take a look at this and see if there's anything else that needs to be put in there. Revise it.
But you don't have something in front of me to revise it. I don't have a red
No,
line.
you don't. At this moment, you don't have.
Okay.
The only thing I added was that I be put in there as a member of that committee.
But we don't have that in front
I know that's not there.
Okay, thank
Because
you.
I haven't.
Bob came up with this idea, was to allow, we thought, you guys thought that if a board member was gonna champion it, then we needed to do a motion to allow a board member to champion revising it. That's what I read as this motion.
Because we failed at executing as it was written
Correct.
the first time.
The first time.
For the question to review and refine where needed the existing chart for and propose additional efforts and for consideration by the 7th. Okay. Director Dodd, did you want to speak to this?
No. Sorry, I'm not finding the language, so I bet I don't understand what exactly the motion is.
Page 7.
It's in the consent item D5 in the board package, Director Dodd.
Okay.
Director Grywich, did you wish to be heard?
That was, Director Juszczyk basically got to where I was going. We need Irwin to, in my opinion, we need Irwin to go back and reevaluate this. And a little bit, my preference would be even more than just putting himself on the board, but to focus on how that board, how the Lake Equity Work Group would be comprised and how we will potentially, hopefully recruit volunteers to fill the multiple positions that we unsuccessfully were able to do last time.
Hang on. Mr. Cummins, you wanted to be heard?
I think I remember this very clearly because I had raised all these issues at the time. There's nothing in the charter about how the work's going to get done, and there is a discrepancy around that expectation. So I guess I'm just trying to understand, is the assertion that when we said we were going to create a working group, that we would simply go figure out how to staff that and make it a priority such that it would happen no matter what?
Yeah, that's what I understand the board does. That's a policy decision of the board.
Okay, so
And if, with all respect, if my CEO believes that that's not something that this staff can absorb, and it's not fair to you, I would have liked to have heard that when we voted on that. We didn't. But if we need to go back and revisit it and say, we don't have the bandwidth to get this done, okay, then come back and say, I want you to rescind that motion because I don't have the bandwidth to get it done. But it seems to me that that's a conversation where time ought to be put aside. Somebody, and he's made three people he'd like to get some time with, needs to sit down and figure this one out because the board voted for this thing to exist.
That's not the question I'm asking. What is being asserted now is the board voted to tell me exactly who is going to staff it and in what way.
No, sir.
Okay.
No, sir. We did not.
Then that is the question I'm asking, because it is not the context within which I brought this to you tonight. The context within I brought this to you tonight is whether or not Sam Kendrick and Ben Rhodes and Cam Adams are the people that have to be doing the staff work because they're established by charter as the committee members. And I'm saying that is an expectation that is very difficult for me, and I had no expectation of that at the time of the vote. And frankly, it was told to me that that was not what, but nonetheless.
So the question is, again, I'm trying to get a resolution here. The question is, in the resolution that established the working group, it named a staff person.
No, it named people participating in the committee.
Yeah.
It did not name the staff.
Person was
It
going
did
to
not name
be,
staff people. It
right.
named 3 people who would participate on the committee. 2 were named in the resolution, and the 3rd one is to be named by the CEO.
2 staff members were named in the resolution?
Yes. They are
2 staff members by name or by title?
Title.
Okay.
I'm sorry, by title?
I beg pardon?
I just couldn't hear. They were by title?
They were identified by
name.
title.
By title.
Can I ask for a clarification on use of language? Because we've talked about staffing the committee, and Director Grywich has said we've failed to staff it. We had failed to recruit sufficient volunteers to fill out the position, the volunteer slots that had been named. But then I hear Matt with concerns about RA staff and their time to be put into it. So it's not clear to me whether we are always talking about the same thing, because we would have to have more volunteers to make the committee happen. And there would have to be someone on staff to support it.
That's
And
my fault, Lori. That's my fault, Lori.
Share Mac's concerns. Yeah.
I should have been more clear. Every time I've been speaking, I've been specifically focused on volunteers and and making sure that we have the right composition of volunteers.
Thank you. Okay.
If I may address the question of staffing, there are a number of committees for which RA provides staffing, particularly volunteer committee, advisory committees, but also other kinds of committees which are staffed, and nowhere is staffing mentioned in the creation of those committees. It is assumed that staffing will be provided, and the CEO makes the judgment as to who will staff and the time that will be necessary to dedicate to it. It is not part of the resolution normally. It's a rare thing to do that, and I have never seen that. If you can point to me where it's been done, I'd like to see it, but I have never seen it. The other thing is, I have seen the working group, for instance, that was run for lakes, docks, and boats. And the person who directed that committee was a volunteer, a member. And there were a lot of people who participated who had some expertise in the matter because they have been long-time users of boats or docks, and they were the person who was in charge of lakes and docks was on that committee as a staff person and in providing additional information that may be necessary. And it was, a lot of the information that was provided was pretty off the shelf. Sorry.
That was the information coming off the shelf.
Yeah. And so it was relatively easy to provide. And I don't anticipate that there will be a lot of detailed information that will have to be provided by a staff person. I think there may be some initially, but that is readily available. And a lot of it will be created by the members of the committee in the course of the discussions. And to the extent that you feel that you cannot provide that information or the staffing necessary, then I think that the committee itself may be able to resolve that. And I will participate in that effort to provide that additional work.
Director Joseph.
I don't know the proper Robert's rules, but I'm going to say point of order, because the motion I made is, do we send Irwin off to make edits and bring them back to the board? Not what should the Lake Equity Charter look like, what should be in it, and what not.
It says revise it.
It does say revise it, but tonight, we're not talking about what it should look like and whether staff should be on it, or not staff named on it. It's literally, do we send Irwin off to do some work and bring us back a product that we can then consider and debate all we want? Mm-hmm. But that's the motion that's on the table.
I understand that, but what I'm hearing from our CEO.
Right, so I think that Mac's concerns are completely valid, just next time when it comes back.
If I jumped the gun, I'm sorry. I thought we were doing that and you'd already asked Irwin to go look into that and bring it to the group. And Irwin told me, I just want to go with what's here. And I said, I have concerns. I think I need to talk about that with the board. So I appreciate it.
Yeah, it's just, we hadn't authorized him to go look.
Okay.
Apparently it's already made a decision, but you know.
And in the course of this motion, in the course of him going and looking, there will be interaction between Director Flashman and 3 members of staff. And Director Flashman, can you give us an idea of how much time you're going to need with them?
A couple of hours with each at most, probably. In my initial investigation, that's what I'm looking at. That's to come back with something, not necessarily what the future may bring in terms of their participation.
Right.
If they're members of the committee, then I would expect they would attend the committee meetings and do the kinds of things that would ordinarily be requested of members of the working group.
Which would be in your write-up.
Is there a problem with that, Mr. Cummins? 2 hours from each of 3 people.
We can find the time. that sounds like a lot of time to me, to be honest.
It sounds like a lot.
But,
That's in the next month or so.
you know, the suggestion that I had made to Irwin is if we're going to move forward with the creation of this group, and there's a lot of good work that this group can do. I think this is a worthwhile effort. I'm solely concerned about not meeting some other expectation that's out there because they overlap, you know. So the suggestion I made is, you know, why would a couple of staff, you know, as compared to the other volunteers that want to weigh in on what the group should be?
Yeah.
I mean, this is really a chartering discussion at this point. So to me, it would make sense to talk about the charter and then talk to the staff and the other volunteers about the work program and how to organize the first couple meetings and that sort of thing.
Kind of a chicken and egg issue.
Talking to.
Hey, John, since you haven't turned right, see that my hand was up for a little while?
No, I did. I'm sorry, Director Johnson. Can we beg your indulgence, Director Flashman? Thank you, Director Johnson. I apologize. I did not see your hand up. I'm terribly sorry. Please go ahead.
Thank you. My question is kind of fundamental here. It looks like Max got his staff has a lot of work ahead of them on their plate at the moment. Is September a date that we need to be married to? I mean, it really feels like we're building a schedule with a rushed schedule that doesn't need to be. Why, if Irwin needs, 2 hours per staff member, let's see if it can't be spread out over a longer period of time, rather than say, you guys have to have this done by the September meeting, when there really is no impetus for that, other than any vote that was passed last meeting.
May I respond?
Please.
Please.
I put that date in there because I want to move this forward. I do not want it lagging. It has lagged already much too long. This motion was approved in December. We are in July. That is too much. And I want it to move forward. I put that date in there to make it happen. I don't want to extend this anymore.
I hear what you're saying. However, I feel like a lot of time has progressed, and now we're at the end and we're in a rush. And rather than rush, again, I go back to what I said in the previous meeting. To get to this stage, let's do it right. If we're going to do it, let's do it right. And I don't feel like, squeezing, Mac's team and getting to meet an arbitrary noble with a noble intent, but an arbitrary deadline.
Would you be opposed to moving this to the regular September board meeting?
I will put it in the framework of not later than the regular September board meeting. It doesn't mean it can't be done earlier.
Travis and I motion and Travis second. Travis, can you accept the later September meeting?
Yes.
Because I do, so
Okay.
happy to amend it.
I need somebody to move that amendment. Director Graywich, help me, would you please? Move to amend the motion.
He seconded it, so he has to agree to the subject.
Travis
No,
and
that's not
I.
how it works. Director Graywich, can you make a motion to amend the motion from September 7th to September 27th? Is that our regular meeting?
Move.
28.
28.
28, okay.
Move to amend Director Juszczyk's original motion so that the Lake Equity Work Group charter discussion is shifted from the September 7th board meeting to the September 27th.
Not later than.
Not later than.
That was his intention.
Not later than the September 27th.
Do I have a second?
20.
Do I have a second?
28th board meeting.
Do I have a second to that
I
amendment?
will second that as well.
Thank you.
Lori's here.
Is there any further discussion on that amendment? Hearing and seeing none. All in
Lori's
favor?
hand is
Lori?
My hand's up.
Hand up.
I could support the amendment, but I just want to throw in my 2 cents that in my view, this needs to be primarily a volunteer-led committee where discussions among the volunteers about the scope of the work and the goals of the committee should precede expenditures of staff time, because I think using 6 hours of staff time prior to volunteer engagement would not be time well used.
All right, any further discussion on the motion, on the amendment? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor of the amendment will say aye.
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 That's unanimous of all those present and voting. For any further discussion on the motion as amended? Director Flashman.
I would also like to note that I would like, to the extent that we can, move forward with gathering more volunteers to submit applications, and I will have discussions with MAC as to how we may proceed with that forthwith.
Is that all right?
Yeah, I think so. From a timing standpoint, my assumption then would be if we're going to discuss the charter, let's say no later than the September meeting, we just have to tell people when an interview or something might be in an application deadline. Can I assume that everyone's looking at a decision in September, so it'd be October, November, or something that looks like that?
I think that sounds right.
I would like to do it sooner. We'll talk about it.
But your motion doesn't say that.
No, I know.
The motion on the table doesn't say that.
Yeah.
Any further discussion on the motion as amended? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor will say aye.
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 Director Collins?
No.
Yo.
The motion carries unanimously of all those present and voting. It's 10 after 10. We have two items that we didn't reach yet again. And I'm going to ask them for a motion to move that conversation to September 7th.
So moved.
I will move that we move items N and O to December 7th.
And that's, you'll second it.
Yeah.
And is there any discussion on that matter? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Director Collins, you're voting aye, I assume? That's unanimous.
No, I'm a nay.
Oh, wait a minute. One no. Thank you. All right, that's our agenda. No, what do we got?
Executive session, consult with counsel as Q.
Is there anything further to discussion in executive session?
It's only if needed, and it's not needed.
New business?
Any new business? Hearing and seeing none. There being no further matter before the board, we stand adjourned at 10:12.